Chapter 686. Qin Wenyan and Mo Qingqing stood on the ceremonial stage, facing each other. Radiant smiles could be seen in their eyes as they held hands, facing the people of the world. Wenyan, shall we begin? Qin Chuan, who was seated on the main seat, asked. Let's wait a little longer. Qin Wenyan smiled. There were still many people who hadn't arrived yet. And indeed, at this moment, several silhouettes soared through the air as they flew over. Rows of silhouettes could be seen. There were actually more than 10 groups of people, and all of them seemed to be from different powers. They soared through the air, exuding an extremely powerful aura. But even so, when they arrived at the red carpet, they still descended from the air and shouted. The Venerate Heavens sect of Ginku of Grand Xia is here to offer our congratulations. The Shi clan of Ginku of Grand Xia is here to offer our congratulations. The Hua clan of Grand Xia is here to offer our congratulations. The Sword Extinction sect of Grand Xia is here to offer our congratulations. The Grand Xia Empire, voices rang out unceasingly, reverberating through the air, shaking the entire Emperor Star Academy and even causing the entire royal capital of Chu to tremble. The transcendent powers of Grand Xia had arrived. Only to see several silhouettes walking along the red carpet, arriving at a location not far away from the ceremonial stage. Their gazes were fixed on the figure on the ceremonial stage. It was none other than that handsome young man, Qin Wenyan, who hadn't even reached the age of 30 this year. He had already suppressed the transcendent powers of Grand Xia to the point where they couldn't even stand a foothold in Grand Xia unless they submitted. Qin Wenyan stood on the ceremonial stage, sweeping his gaze over to the crowd. He then took a step forward and smiled. Wenyan is extremely gratified that all the seniors of Grand Xia are willing to come. Everyone coldly laughed in their hearts, but they wouldn't reveal their thoughts. Old man Tianji laughed as he stared at Qin Wenyan. Back then he had already foreseen the rise of the demonic star, causing the skies of Grand Xia to change. After that, on the battle platform of the Heavenly Fate rankings, he guessed that the demonic star was none other than Qin Wenyan. Not too long later, everything came true. Most probably, no one would be able to obstruct the unification of Grand Xia. Since sect leader Qin has invited us, we naturally came. It's just that back then when we heard sect leader Qin wanted to announce how to deal with us during the wedding ceremony, we didn't dare to agree. Although we don't have sect leader Qin's talent, we are still the leaders of our respective clans and sects in Grand Xia. It's impossible for us to live under someone else's roof. If sect leader Qin has something to say, you better make it clear today. The countenance of the Shi clan's ancestor sharpened. The number of people who came this time around was even more compared to the time when they tried to assassinate Qin Wenyan. Other than those powers who were willing to follow Qin Wenyan, the ascendants of the other transcendent powers were all here. Qin Wenyan had already sent out invitations to all the transcendent powers. This meant that no one would be able to escape this calamity. Qin Wenyan's meaning was very simple. Follow the flow of events, no one would be able to escape unscathed. Qin Wenyan stared at the Shi clan's ancestor as his countenance gradually turned sharp. He swept his gaze over to the other transcendent powers only to see that they were all staring at him with confidence in their eyes. This caused a playful expression to appear on Qin Wenyan's face. Seems like the transcendent powers of Grand Xia haven't given up all hope yet. Obey the heavens' will. From now onwards, the Azure Emperor Palace shall control Grand Xia, becoming the Emperor of Grand Xia. All the other powers shall submit to us. Qin Wenyan's words were cold, his voice sweeping through the heavens and earth. When those ascendants stared at Qin Wenyan's eyes, their hearts trembled. They could faintly sense that Qin Wenyan was even more terrifying than before. Those eyes of his seemed to be able to pierce through their hearts, causing fear to rise in their hearts. Qin Wenyan, are you sure you want to do this? The Wang ancestor coldly spoke. Their Wang clan was unrivaled under the heavens in the war continent. There were no other powers that could contend against them. How could they endure being a subject of the Azure Emperor Palace? From now on, the Azure Emperor Palace of Grand Xia would confer him the title of king, and they would become his subjects? The hearts of those from the Emperor Star Academy trembled. Although they had heard many rumors, It was a completely different matter to personally witness Qin Wentian's might. Even when facing the hegemons of Grand Xia, he was still so domineering. Today, all of you should be here, right? Qin Wentian said coldly. The countenances of the ascendants froze. They didn't know what Qin Wentian meant by this. Back then, I have yet to settle the debt of you assassinating me. I wish to unify Grand Xia, but I don't wish to weaken the strength of the Grand Xia Empire. But since all of you insist on going about things the wrong way, I will give you two choices. Do you want us to handle the matters of Grand Xia ourselves, or do you want the experts of the Royal Sacred Region to interfere? Qin Wentian stared at the ascendants as he continued, if you all want to handle it yourselves, I won't borrow the experts of the Royal Sacred Region to settle this. But if you all want to borrow external help, I don't mind either. Tell me, which choice do you all want? Emichim? The ascendants furrowed their brows. Wasn't Qin Wentian heavily injured? Why was he still so confident? Hearing the arrogance in his tone, it was as though Qin Wentian knew where their confidence came from. And no matter what, Qin Wentian had absolute confidence that they could choose freely. When these ascendants came, they were filled with confidence. But after the words of Qin Wentian rang out, they were all stunned into silence. None of them dared to reply. I don't mind the unification of Grand Xia. The Venerate Heavens sect will stand aloof from worldly affairs and ignore the conflicts in Grand Xia. If the Azure Emperor Palace controls Grand Xia, my Venerate Heavens sect is also willing to submit. I only hope that sect leader Qin won't allow my Venerate Heavens sect to be embroiled in disputes. Old man Tianji slowly spoke, his words causing the countenances of those ascendants to turn incredibly unsightly. The Venerate Heavens sect was one of the strongest powers in Grand Xia, yet they actually took the initiative to back down. Fine, after Grand Xia is unified, the Azure Emperor Palace will control the Venerate Heavens sect. The Venerate Heavens sect will be the place to nurture the talents of Grand Xia. Not only that, it will still be the same as before, managing the heavenly fate rankings. Senior, are you willing? Qin Wentian stared at Old Man Tianji as he spoke. That would naturally be for the best. Old Man Tianji laughed. The Venerate Heavens sect was indeed suitable to handle this matter. Qin Wentian nodded his head to Old Man Tianji. The Venerate Heavens sect had never participated in any conflicts with him before, he naturally wouldn't make things difficult for them. The countenances of the other ascendants grew incredibly unsightly. The Venerate Heavens sect had already submitted, but what would happen if they submitted to Qin Wentian? Most probably, they wouldn't have such an opportunity anymore. There were still the Thousand-Ju Alliance, Jiang Clan and Mystic Moon sect before them. Since you guys aren't willing to express your stance, let's do it according to my rules. The transcendent powers of Grand Xia have all arrived. From today onwards, the Azure Emperor Palace shall control Grand Xia. Is there anyone who isn't willing? Qin Wentian swept his gaze over the crowd, staring at them. The countenances of those ascendants grew incredibly unsightly to behold. The Wang ancestor spoke, none of us will agree. The Azure Emperor Palace doesn't have the qualifications to govern Grand Xia. Qin Wentian walked down the ceremonial stage, moving step by step towards the Wang ancestor. The entire space turned sluggish, the gazes of everyone were all on Qin Wentian. It was rumored that some time ago, when the ascendants wanted to kill Qin Wentian, he had once frightened them into retreating. That scene seemed to be happening again. Also, back then, Qin Wentian was heavily injured, but this time around, he was filled with vigor and vitality. The ascendants involuntarily retreated a few steps. They could only watch as Qin Wentian walked towards the Wang ancestor. There were so many ascendants in the surroundings, yet no one dared to act against Qin Wentian. Are you not willing? Qin Wentian stood above the Wang ancestor, his countenance incomparably cold. Yes, we are all not willing. The Wang ancestor stared at Qin Wentian. The other ascendants also walked towards him. This time around, it was as though they wanted to advance and retreat together. Very well. Qin Wentian's voice was ice cold. An eye appeared in the center of his brows. With just a single glance, the Wang ancestor felt as though he had entered a dream. In this place, he was the only one facing Qin Wentian, there was no one else. This isn't the first time you provoked me. Earlier, you used my clan members to threaten me and I have yet to settle the score with you. Now, you want to stick your neck out? Since this is the case, I shall grant you your wish today. Qin Wentian's voice rang out in the ears of the Wang ancestor. After which, a terrifying destructive might gushed towards him. The Wang ancestor stabbed his finger towards the center of his brows, wanting to break free from the dreamscape. However, he discovered that even with his will, he had no way to break free. You broke through. The countenance of the Wang ancestor turned pale. Qin Wentian activated the dreamscape and he couldn't break free. This meant that Qin Wentian's dream will had already surpassed the strength of his will, causing him to be unable to break free. Yes. Qin Wentian admitted. The countenance of the Wang ancestor turned ashen. The Wang clan of the War Continent is finished. Qin Wentian waved his palms. This palm imprint was incomparably resplendent, blotting out the sun. It was akin to a constellation descending upon the Wang ancestor, as a storm of destruction ravaged the area. There was simply no way for the Wang ancestor to evade. This caused the Wang ancestor to despair. After his breakthrough, Qin Wentian had no way to defend against it. Bang! The Wang ancestor didn't even have the chance to resist. He was directly slain by Qin Wentian, turning into ashes, not even leaving a trace behind. The entire Emperor Star Academy was silent. They all stared at this strange scene. The Wang ancestor didn't even have the chance to resist. They only saw Qin Wentian killing the Wang ancestor with a single palm strike. That palm strike seemed to contain some sort of magical power. The countenances of the various ascendants paled. They were all silently musing in their hearts, why hasn't Qin Wentian appeared yet? Is there anyone else who is unconvinced? Qin Wentian stared down at the crowd, his voice as domineering as ever. At this moment, Qin Wentian abruptly inclined his head, staring at the horizons. Qin Wentian, aren't you too arrogant? An arrogant voice drifted over. Qin Wentian's lips curled up in an incomparably cold smile, akin to the edge of a blade. Finally he appeared. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. There weren't many people who paid attention to the situation in Grand Xia, but Junyu was one of them. The news of the Pill Emperor Hall being destroyed couldn't be hidden from him. Today he came here. Naturally, he wasn't alone. Beside Junyu, there were many experts. When they stared at Qin Wentian, their gazes were filled with flames of anger, as well as extreme coldness. You came. Qin Wentian stared at Junyu, he wasn't surprised at all. This morning, he had already received the news from the Medicine Sovereign, and this news was extremely fascinating. Back then in the Royal Sacred Sect, the Sacred Emperor had told them to settle this themselves. What status did the Sacred Emperor have? It was impossible for him to go back on his words. Xia Sheng's death was due to his incompetence. Why would he care about the life and death of a mere disciple of the Royal Sacred Sect? But even if the Sacred Emperor didn't care, it didn't mean that as the hegemonic powers of the Royal Sacred Sect, they wouldn't care about being smacked in the face by Qin Wentian. Not only that, after Qin Wentian left, there was a female who threatened the Royal Sacred Sect. There had to be an explanation for this matter. Qin Wentian, let me tell you a piece of news. The Medicine Sovereign won't be able to attend your wedding today. Junyu stared at Qin Wentian. I know. Qin Wentian's countenance was extremely calm. The Medicine Sovereign had already stated clearly that there were experts from the Royal Sacred Sect stationed outside the Medicine Sovereign Valley. They didn't want to do anything, nor did they want to give the Medicine Sovereign an excuse to act. They only had a single goal, and that was to prevent the Medicine Sovereign from leaving the Medicine Sovereign Valley. Emichim? Junyu furrowed his brows. Did Qin Wentian know about this? Did the Medicine Sovereign inform him? But why did he still dare to be so confident? This time around, their lineup was extremely powerful. Even the human emperor of Yi Qingyun was included in their plans. Tap tap tap. At this moment, a crisp sound drifted over from the carpet. It seemed to be the sound of a walking stick. The crowd felt somewhat bewildered as they turned their gazes over, only to see a cripple walking over. Qin Wentian also turned his gaze in that direction. At the instant he saw that silhouette, his heart pounded violently, as though he had been struck by lightning. After which, his eyes turned bloodshot as he stared fixedly at the silhouette that had just arrived. Chapter 687. Qin Chuan also saw that silhouette. He abruptly stood up and stared at the newcomer, causing the people around him to have strange expressions on their faces. Who is this cripple exactly? To think that he could cause such a huge reaction from both Qin Wenyan and Qin Chuan. Uncle Black. Beside Mo Qingqing, Qin Yao mumbled in a low voice. Uncle Black was actually still alive? He even came to attend Qin Wentian's wedding. Seems like Uncle Black had always been concerned about Qin Wenyan. Clack, clack, clack. The melodious sounds rang out as Uncle Black walked towards the ceremonial stage step by step. Fairy Qing Mei and the rest wanted to stop him, but when they turned their heads and glanced at Qin Wenyan, and upon seeing the expression on Qin Wentian's face, they knew that they couldn't stop this cripple. Only to see that the cripple actually walked up the ceremonial stage. The people in this space all quietly watched him, and nobody tried to stop him. It was very strange, but the sound of his walking stick seemed to have some sort of magical power, causing people to involuntarily listen attentively. Uncle Black walked up the ceremonial stage, and walked in front of Qin Wenyan. His calloused hands gently caressed Qin Wentian's face. That solemn face in Qin Wentian's memories finally revealed a warm smile of concern. Qin Wenyan also smiled, his smile resembling that of a child, extremely radiant. This scene caused people to be even more bewildered. The relationship between this cripple and Qin Wenyan seemed to be so intimate that it surpassed the imaginations of others. If not, there was no way he would act so intimately, and Qin Wenyan was still smiling foolishly. You've grown up and are becoming more and more like your father. Why are you still so childish? Uncle Black lightly caressed Qin Wentian's face. Staring at the handsome countenance in front of him, lines of wrinkles appeared on his smiling face. Qin Wentian's heart trembled. He had many words he wanted to say, but he didn't know where to start. It's so good to see your big day. Seeing the two of you is like seeing your parents. Uncle Black pulled on Qin Wentian's hand as they walked to the side of Mo Qingqing. Staring at Mo Qingqing, a look of satisfaction could be seen in Uncle Black's eyes as he smiled. Lass, not bad, you are a good match for each other. Mo Qingqing had never met Uncle Black before, but from the interactions between him and Qin Wenyan, she could tell that the relationship between the two of them was extremely intimate. Qingqing, this is Uncle Black. He took care of me since I was young. Qin Wenyan laughed. Only now did Mo Qingqing understand the relationship between the two of them. She then bowed to Uncle Black. Qingqing pays her respects to Uncle Black. Good. For your wedding, I don't have anything worthy to give you. It's just that in the past, Qin Wentian's mother prepared a gift for her future daughter-in-law. Today, I'll give it to you on behalf of Madam. Uncle Black smiled. After which, he put down his walking stick and stretched his hands out. Instantly, a gift box appeared in his hands. Just this gift box alone was already glowing with a brilliant light, indicating that it was extremely valuable. Open it. This gift was left for you by Mrs. Qin. I've been keeping it safe for her. You have to accept it no matter what. Uncle Black solemnly spoke. Mo Qingqing nodded her head. She naturally knew that Qin Wenyan was only an adopted son of the Qin clan. Uncle Black was the person who took care of Qin Wenyan since he was young. In that case, it was only natural that Uncle Black was acquainted with Qin Wentian's biological parents. This gift was given to her by Qin Wentian's mother. How could she not accept it? Stretching out her hands, Mo Qingqing solemnly opened the gift box. Instantly, a resplendent beam of light shot out, resplendent and resplendent. It was as though a multicolored radiance was being released from within, incomparably dazzling. Mo Qingqing closed her eyes, and when she opened them, she saw an incomparably resplendent phoenix robe within. It was as though it was woven from the feathers of a phoenix, incomparably dazzling. How beautiful! Mo Qingqing sighed in admiration as she stared at the phoenix robe. Qin Wenyan felt so moved in his heart, his eyes turning red. He had even forgotten about the invading enemies. At this moment, in his eyes, there was only the gift his mother had prepared for Qingqing. This was the first time in his 28 years of life that he truly felt the care and concern of his biological mother. It was as though no matter where she was, she would always be concerned about him. "Qingqing, try it on." Qin Wendian smiled as he looked at Mo Qingqing. Mo Qingqing nodded her head as she took the phoenix robe and wore it. The instant the phoenix robe landed on Mo Qingqing's body, a resplendent glow permeated the air. There was no wind, but the phoenix robe fluttered by itself. The resplendent glow enveloped Mo Qingqing, and at this moment, it was as though there was a formless energy supporting Mo Qingqing's body, as a powerful will flowed into her mind. Mo Qingqing closed her eyes, as the phoenix robe fluttered in the wind. At this moment, she was even more beautiful than before, inviolable. "How beautiful!" Many in the crowd exclaimed in their hearts. Mo Qingqing's countenance and the phoenix robe were a perfect match. An instant later, Mo Qingqing opened her eyes, as a strange glow flickered within. After which, she murmured in a low voice, "Mother, thank you." As the sound of her voice faded, the phoenix robe transformed into a blur. Every inch of the robe was tightly fitted to Mo Qingqing's body, as though it was specially made for her. With an intention of her will, a pair of resplendent phoenix wings appeared on the robe, flapping gently in the air. At this instant, Mo Qingqing was like a descendant of the ancient phoenix, like a noble princess. This caused a thought to appear in the minds of the crowd. Could it be that this phoenix robe was truly made from the feathers of a phoenix? This was impossible, right? Mo Qingqing's body landed on the ceremonial platform, and the wings closed as she directly vanished from sight. She stared at Qin Wenyan, as the smile in her eyes never faded. "Wenyan, I like Mother's gift very much." Qin Wenyan was also very happy in his heart. He stared at Uncle Black, only to see Uncle Black speaking to him. "Your father only left you a single sentence. A good man, no matter how ordinary or not, should have an indomitable spirit and have a clear conscience. Your child understands." A smile appeared on Qin Wenyan's face. He had seen his parents before in his memories, and he knew where the name Wenyan came from. "Have you guys spoken enough?" At this moment, Jun Yu's voice drifted over, interrupting Qin Wendian and the others. A cripple was actually trying to act mysterious here? Uncle Black's gaze turned over, only to see several figures walking out from the crowd. These people didn't reveal their true features, and all of them wore masks. It was unknown who they were. Those from the royal sacred sect are simply too impudent. A voice rang out in the air as a group of figures descended from the skies. The person in the center was clad in luxurious robes, with a crown on his head. This person was none other than the human emperor of an ancient country, Yi Qingyun. "Foster father, you're here." Qin Wenyan called out as he stared at the figure in the air. Wenyan, I've long discovered the existence of these people. Hence, I didn't show myself. However, I'm sure the medicine sovereign has already made arrangements. Yi Qingyun spoke as he arrived on the ceremonial stage. "Ha, little Yi, you even know about this?" A voice drifted over. After which, a bright light flashed as two silhouettes directly appeared on the ceremonial stage. It was none other than the medicine sovereign and that old man who killed an elder of the royal sacred region. The gazes of Jun Yu and the experts from the royal sacred sect froze as they stared at the medicine sovereign, as though they had just seen something unbelievable. "Medicine sovereign, you actually came here?" An expert from the royal sacred sect stared at the medicine sovereign as he spoke. The medicine sovereign coldly glanced at those from the royal sacred sect as killing intent flashed in his eyes. "Seems like I've given you guys too much face, to think that you actually dared to surround my medicine sovereign valley. Medicine sovereign, what do you want?" An expert from the royal sacred sect coldly spoke. "What do I want?" A cold light flickered in the eyes of the medicine sovereign. He turned his gaze onto Uncle Black, only to see Uncle Black sweeping a glance at those people before he transmitted his voice to Qin Wenyan. "From the day you were born, other than me, this trash, bringing you into the sect, us old fellows have never done anything for you. This is the orders of your parents. A man should always be strong. All the hardships and setbacks you have experienced, they will all be precious treasures for you in the future. If there comes a day when you can become an immortal, we will naturally tell you everything because you already have the qualifications to become a supreme expert. What you have now is still insufficient. But today is your wedding. Even if your parents blame us, we will still act for you. Uncle Black's voice rang out in Qin Wentian's mind. After which, he turned his gaze onto those masked figures as he spoke, "Kill them all without mercy." As the sound of his voice faded, a terrifying light engulfed the heavens and earth. Instantly, the sky changed color as the wind and clouds howled. The countenances of those experts from the royal sacred sect were all incredibly unsightly to behold. At the same time, they released their constellations as resplendent beams of light illuminated the entire space. And at this moment, among those masked figures, a silhouette stepped out. With a wave of his hand, a spatial constellation manifested, enveloping the entire space as a terrifying spatial tempest frenziedly manifested. Voila! That tempest ravaged the surroundings. The experts from the Emperor Star Academy couldn't even stand stably. When they felt the terrifying chi flow, their hearts pounded madly. They didn't even dare to imagine how powerful such an expert was. Bzz. The raging wind ravaged the space as the spatial tempest transformed into a black hole, drifting away from the crowd, as though intentionally not wanting to destroy the wedding venue. In the blink of an eye, the spatial tempest had already soared to the skies. But even on the ground, one could still feel the destructive chi flow from it. However, in just a short instant, the spatial tempest gradually dissipated. When everything vanished like smoke, the crowd discovered to their shock that there was no one within the spatial tempest. Is he dead? The hearts of the crowd pounded violently. This spatial tempest was caused by those from Qin Wentian's side. In that case, those on his side naturally could leave safely. But as for Jun Yu and the others, when they thought of the words "kill them all without mercy," the crowd couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. Turning their gazes towards those masked figures, they suddenly discovered that all of them had vanished, as though they had never appeared before. Maybe they were mixed in with the crowd from the Emperor Star Academy, silently observing this wedding. They were so low profile that if it wasn't for someone causing trouble, they wouldn't even show themselves. Those ascendants of Grand Xia involuntarily trembled. Those existences were all experts from the royal sacred sect, experts that governed the entire royal sacred region. Yet they were all killed without mercy. In that case, what did they count for? The ascendants of Grand Xia? In front of them, they were nothing more than ant-like existences, yet they still dared to cause trouble here. Chapter 688. Only when Qin Wentian lowered his head did he discover that those people had already disappeared. His heart was filled with unease. So it turned out that not only his parents, Uncle Black and the rest had been silently observing him. Today was the day of his grand wedding. Uncle Black brought his mother's gift and most probably his father's loyal subordinates as well. Qin Wentian suddenly glanced at the medicine sovereign as a smile flickered in his eyes. When he turned his gaze back to Mo Qingqing, everything seemed to have cleared up. No wonder the medicine sovereign looked at him in a new light and even helped him to such an extent. Just because he was the person Mo Qingqing loved, the medicine sovereign would spare no effort to help him? Even standing on the opposing side of the royal sacred sect? Qin Wentian wasn't a fool. He did have talent, but in this world, those lofty existences wouldn't only look at your talent. What did your talent have to do with others? Why would they help you, take care of you, and even offend your enemies? There was only one possibility. Uncle Black and the medicine sovereign were acquainted with each other. Also, why didn't he die back then in the Pill Emperor Hall? Could it be that only Qinger could save him? Back then, Qinger said that Mo Qingqing might still be alive. Maybe she had seen something. At this moment, Qin Wentian guessed that Mo Qingqing should have been sent to the Medicine Sovereign Valley by Uncle Black and the others, and was accepted as a disciple by the Medicine Sovereign. If this was the case, everything could be connected. This was also why the Medicine Sovereign was so confident in his letter. Because he had long known that Uncle Black and the others had already arrived in Chu. Qin Wenyan was thinking that back then when the Dark Shadow Sovereign tried to assassinate him, Uncle Black should have been there as well. But these people were truly able to endure. Even when he encountered such danger, they still didn't appear. As he thought of this, an imposing silhouette appeared in his eyes. That silhouette was indomitable, iron-blooded and gentle. That silhouette told him that a man should strengthen himself. He wanted Qin Wenyan to ask the heavens, who was the master of this world? Father, mother, your son will definitely not disappoint you. Qin Wenyan stared at the sky. It was as though he could see the two silhouettes silently watching him grow. Only by becoming an immortal would one have the qualifications to become a supreme expert. Did he know about his parents? Uncle Black, Senior Medicine Sovereign, Foster Father, please be seated. Today, all of you will be the witnesses for me and Qingqing. Qin Wenyan smiled at everyone. Ah, good. I'm truly happy to see you and Qingqing getting married. However, I don't have anything else to give you. Today, I brought some people with me. In the future, you will be in charge of this place. Yi Qingyun said. Suddenly, a group of people came to the front of the ceremonial platform. They knelt on one knee in front of Qin Wenyan and said respectfully, "Greetings, Master." They are all at the Celestial Phenomenon realm and I didn't force them. They followed me because they wanted to repay a debt of gratitude. If there comes a day when you feel that there's no meaning in keeping them around, just release them. Yi Qingyun was still as heroic as ever. Qin Wenyan nodded. It just so happened that he lacked an army that could govern Great Xia. With these people, Great Xia could develop better. Rise. Qin Wenyan waved his hands as everyone stood up and stood at the side. Those ascendants of Grand Xia were all trembling in their hearts. This was called having nothing else to give away? Gifting a small army of Celestial Phenomenon ascendants with a single move? All of them were sweating in their hearts, even the thought of dying appeared in their minds. All of them stood there in trepidation, no one dared to move. Jun Yu, the one they relied on, was directly killed by someone. The pitiful Jun Yu, that arrogant disciple of the royal sacred sect, was killed like an ant, directly trampling him to death. The medicine sovereign, Uncle Black, Yi Qingyun and the others sat down. Qin Chuan and the others all took the initiative to give up their seats to show their respect. Although they were very close to Qin Wenyan understood how important Uncle Black was in Qin Wentian's heart. This old man had been protecting Qin Wenyan for over 10 years. The feelings he had for Qin Wenyan were incomparable. In addition, the status of these people were far from what they could compare to. Although the medicine sovereign and the others wouldn't care so much. We're all a family, feel free to take a seat. The medicine sovereign laughed in an amiable manner. Momentarily, everyone laughed and no longer bothered about it. They all sat down in a row. There was no need to differentiate who was in the first place. Only now did Qin Wenyan turn his gaze onto those ascendants of Grand Xia. He then spoke, "I've already given you guys a chance. For the sake of Grand Xia's prosperity, I initially didn't want to touch you guys. I only needed you guys to strengthen yourselves, allowing the overall strength of my Grand Xia to grow stronger. However, you guys have repeatedly refused to give up on killing me. In that case, there's no longer a need for me to be so patient with you guys." As the sound of Qin Wentian's voice faded, the countenances of the ascendants of Grand Xia instantly turned pale. The Sure ancestor spoke, "Qin Wenyan, since things have already come to this, I don't wish to say anything more. But why must you be so ruthless? We are willing to submit to the Azure Emperor Palace. Wouldn't it be good if this matter ends here?" What a joke! Qin Wenyan waved his hands. I haven't even said that I want to unify Grand Xia and you guys have already joined hands to deal with me. Not long ago, I gave you guys a chance. Now that the situation is completely clear, you guys know that you can't do anything, yet you still want to retreat unscathed? The winner is the king, the loser is the bandit. Since you can't do anything, you want to retreat? What a joke! Qin Wentian's words caused everyone to feel a chill from head to toe. That's right. The winner is the king, the loser is the bandit. Qin Wenyan wanted to unify Grand Xia. If they had the ability to kill Qin Wenyan, they would have already won. But after trying to kill him several times, Would Qin Wenyan still agree to retreat unscathed? However, I won't kill you guys. At this moment, Qin Wentian's voice caused the eyes of the crowd to regain a glimmer of light. Mu Feng. Qin Wenyan called out. Mu Feng's silhouette walked out, standing behind Qin Wenyan. Didn't you develop a type of blood poison a while ago? Let them consume it, and from now onwards, you will be in charge of all the transcendent powers of Grand Xia. Qin Wentian spoke. Mu Feng's countenance gleamed with coldness as he stared at the transcendent powers of Grand Xia, slowly walking towards them. Mu Feng's strength isn't strong enough. You guys can still force the poison out of his body. However, all of you have to channel the poison into your blood and body. From now onwards, your lives will be in the hands of Mu Feng. Naturally, you guys can choose to disobey and choose death. Qin Wentian's voice was filled with coldness. The faces of the transcendent powers of Grand Xia turned pale as a sense of helplessness surfaced in their hearts. They could only reluctantly nod their heads. They couldn't bear to die. Given Qin Wentian's talent, he would definitely not stay in Grand Xia. As long as they obeyed the Azure Emperor Palace's orders, Qin Wenyan wouldn't do anything to them. As for the poison, they could slowly get closer to Qin Wenyan in the future, easing the hatred that had accumulated during this period of time. Mu Feng walked up and started to bestow the poison onto these transcendent powers. None of them resisted the corrosion of the blood poison. This type of blood poison was extremely tyrannical and was drawn from Mu Feng's own blood. Once the poison entered their blood and internal organs, Mu Feng would be able to control the effects of the poison and control the lives of these people. A look of relief flashed in Uncle Black's eyes. Qin Wenyan had truly grown up. If these people couldn't be killed, they had to be controlled. If not, human nature was the most unpredictable thing. Even if they submitted today, if there was a chance to kill Qin Wenyan in the future, they wouldn't be so courteous. If they didn't kill them, their lives would be in the hands of Qin Wenyan. None of these transcendent powers dared to defy Mu Feng. As the poison entered their bodies, their countenances all turned black. Mu Feng closed his eyes as an intense black glow radiated from him. Momentarily, the black qi from the transcendent powers grew stronger and stronger. Only after a few moments did Mu Feng finally stop. He stared at Qin Wenyan. That's enough. Return. 3 days later, head to the royal palace of Grand Xia and await further orders. Qin Wenyan waved his hands, expelling them. The countenances of these transcendent powers all changed. Since they had already submitted, they initially wanted to leave a good impression on Qin Wenyan. Yet who would have thought that Qin Wenyan wouldn't even give them a chance to attend the wedding banquet, directly expelling them? Very swiftly, their silhouettes disappeared into the distance. Occasionally, the transcendent powers would glance at each other, wanting to say something, yet they didn't know what to say. They could only sigh in response. Nothing much, we're only being controlled. Let's just say that we've submitted. As long as we don't resist, Qin Wenyan wouldn't do anything to us. The Sure ancestor consoled himself. He doesn't care at all. Someone sighed. Yeah, he doesn't care at all. The Hua ancestor spoke in a depressed tone. Jun Yu represented the people of the royal sacred region to seek them out. Since Hua Taishu was now a disciple of the royal sacred region, they naturally knew which side to stand on. Hence, they chose to stand together with the transcendent powers of Grand Xia. Who would have thought that such a situation would occur? What should we do now? Someone asked. I have something on, I'll make a move first. At this moment, an expert from a transcendent power in the war continent sped away. This scene caused the eyes of the others to narrow. I have something on as well. A few more celestial phenomenon ascendants also sped away. These old foxes. The eyes of the others all flickered. After which, they turned their gazes onto another ascendant from the Wang clan in the war continent. The Wang ancestor was killed by Qin Wenyan. This grudge had already been sown. Qin Wenyan also said that the Wang clan was finished. Wouldn't it be better if they helped Qin Wenyan to settle this matter? Qin Wenyan himself didn't expect that the moment he poisoned them, these old foxes would already start scheming against each other, wanting to wipe out the Wang clan in order to curry favor with him. The hearts of humans were truly unfathomable. Not long ago, the Wang clan was still their ally. The wedding in the Emperor's Star Academy continued. Under the blessings of everyone, Qin Wenyan and Mo Qingqing held hands as they kowtowed to their parents, as well as to the heavens and earth. According to the customs of Chu, the wedding ceremony would start with the kowtowing to the heavens, followed by the kowtowing to the earth and heaven. Yet Qin Wenyan and Mo Qingqing first kowtowed to their parents, before kowtowing to the heavens and earth. After the ceremony ended, Qin Wenyan and Mo Qingqing walked to the side of the stage and called out, "Wine." Luo Huan, who was at the side, smiled as she brought the wine over, only to see Qin Wenyan pouring a jug of wine into the air. After which, he and Mo Qingqing each took a cup of wine as he spoke. "Qingqing, I have no idea where my birth parents are. But today, the two of us will still toast a cup to my parents." Mo Qingqing nodded. The two of them faced the heavens and drained the wine in their cups, before bowing to each other. Only then did they hold hands and smile at each other. "I won't abandon you in this lifetime." Qin Wenyan gazed at Mo Qingqing as he gently spoke. "I'm willing to follow you through life and death." Mo Qingqing replied. These simple words were a lifelong promise. Chapter 689. Not far away from the Emperor's Star Academy, in the air, an intense spatial fluctuation could be felt. Within this spatial fluctuation, two silhouettes could be seen. One of them was an old man clad in luxurious robes. His eyes were closed as he quietly stood there, as though he didn't care about anything. The only thing he cared about was the woman standing beside him. The female was extremely beautiful. She was clad in a simple green robe, silently observing everything that happened in the Emperor's Star Academy. From the start to the end, she only quietly watched. Occasionally, the corners of her eyes would twitch, as a hint of sadness could be seen flickering in her eyes. The situation in Grand Xia has already been unified. What Princess wants to see has already been decided. Isn't it about time for Princess to follow me back to the clan? The old man calmly spoke. This woman was none other than Qing. Qing acted as if she didn't hear his words. She slowly turned her gaze towards the old man. Her expression was still as cold as ever as she said, "Since you sent me here when I was young, why bring me back to the clan?" Back then, when the immortal emperor was vying for the throne, his life could be in danger at any moment. How could he allow Princess to be embroiled in this storm? Reality has proven the wisdom of the immortal emperor. During the vying for the throne, the immortal emperor almost lost his life. That battle was simply too intense and lasted for a total of 20 years before the immortal emperor finally obtained the throne. Now, how could he allow Princess to suffer outside? The old man respectfully spoke. Qing'e was still as cold as ever. "I'm not suffering. Princess, the royal sacred region is just a remote region. Back then, the reason we sent you here was so that no one would be able to find you. The cultivation bases of the people here are extremely weak, and sooner or later, they would encounter a bottleneck." The old man continued, "Not only that, Princess has already promised this old slave. For the sake of Princess, the immortal emperor would create such a huge storm and obtain that immortal art. Now that Princess is unwilling to return with me, how can this old slave explain this to the immortal emperor?" Qing'e was still as cold as ever. She turned her head and stared in the direction of the Emperor's Star Academy as she replied in a low voice, "Let's wait for a few more days." "All right." The old man smiled bitterly and shook his head. He opened his eyes and glanced at the sky below and sighed in his heart. It was easy for females to be trapped by emotions. This was the weakness of females in the cultivation world. The princess seemed to have developed feelings for this young man. Back then, she wanted the great Nirvana immortal art precisely because of this young man. However, although this young man's talent was extraordinary, his status was still far from the princess. If the princess was interested, she could simply issue an imperial edict to select a husband for the princess. That would be enough to shake the entire world. At that time, what kind of demon-level geniuses would there be? When the old man's gaze swept past, the medicine sovereign on the ceremonial stage of the Emperor's Star Academy furrowed his brows. After which, he inclined his head and cast a glance in the direction of the medicine sovereign. However, he swiftly shifted his gaze back as he continued smiling at the young man holding hands with the medicine sovereign. Qin Wenyin and Demo Qingqing held each other's hands as they walked back to the side of the elders. Seeing the two of you, I really want to be young again. The medicine sovereign laughed. The medicine sovereign was simply too old. It was said that he had lived for even longer than the current sacred emperor of the royal sacred sect. Yi Qingyun was also a famous character in the royal sacred region, the human emperor of an ancient country. However, the medicine sovereign could directly refer to him as Little Yi. Yi Qingyun couldn't be angry at him. There was no solution to this. The medicine sovereign's qualifications were all there for all to see. Leaving aside his attainments in alchemy, his combat prowess was also extremely high. He had already reached the peak of celestial phenomenon many years ago, and it has been too long since he last fought. It was rumored that he had survived several times before his time was up. Now, nobody knew how powerful the medicine sovereign was. Uncle Black walked to the side of Qin Wenyin and helped Qin Wenyin to straighten his robes. He then patted Qin Wenyin on his shoulder as he spoke, "From today onwards, you are also someone with a family. You have truly grown up. Your parents will definitely watch as you grow into a man that can support the heavens with his head held high and his feet firmly planted on the ground. Uncle Black will also watch over you." "I will." Qin Wenyin nodded. He placed Uncle Black's hand down and stretched out both his hands to help Uncle Black straighten his robes. After which, he walked up and gave Uncle Black a hug. "Thank you, Uncle Black. Actually, Wenyin has always treated you as his father." Uncle Black, who was tightly hugged by Qin Wenyin, trembled. After which, his eyes turned red as 2 drops of tears involuntarily flowed down his face. A good man would also cry. Tens of years of hope had all been placed on Qin Wenyin. How could he not treat the son of his master as his own? "Master, madam, Wenyin has truly grown up. He won't disappoint you. He will definitely make those people regret." Uncle Black's eyes were red as he stared at the sky as he murmured in a low voice. How could the son of Qin Yuanfeng be inferior? One day, he would also make the immortals and devils cry, causing the divine race to tremble in fear. The two of them separated. Qin Wenyin then walked to the side of Qin Chuan as he smiled, "Foster father." As he spoke, he also hugged Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan patted Qin Wentian's shoulder as his eyes reddened. He was similarly moved in his heart. His only regret was that Qin Wenyin wasn't his biological son. His feelings for Qin Wenyin definitely wouldn't be inferior to his feelings for Qin Yao. He viewed Qin Wenyin as his own son. In the future, Qin Yao might continue to accompany him and find a good man to marry, but she wouldn't be too far away from him. But for Wenyin, he would chase after the footsteps of the strong, walking further and further. In the future, the chances of them meeting each other would be lesser and lesser. "Teacher." Qin Wenyin walked towards Mustang. The two of them smiled and hugged each other. Mustang's kindness towards Qin Wenyin was something he had no way to repay. Back then when he first started cultivating, it was Mustang who led a group of people to Sky Harmony City to save him. After that, Qin Wenyin and Emo Qingqing walked down the ceremonial stage under the escort of the crowd. As the banquet began, the atmosphere in the Emperor Star Academy was extremely lively. However, the spectators felt a sense of disappointment and frustration because they wouldn't be able to see that pair of lovers anymore. Qin Wenyin and Emo Qingqing only stood on the stage. The spectators would rather continue staring at them. They were both living legends, and they were still so young. As for the elders of Qin Wenyin and Emo Qingqing, many of them were also at the legendary realm. In fact, they hadn't even come into contact with the legendary realm yet. Qin Wenyin and Emo Qingqing's beautiful and handsome friends would all become legends in Grand Xia in the future. Every single one of them was exceedingly outstanding. Today, there was no way for the royal capital of Chu to be calm. Everyone in the city was discussing about this wedding. Today, Qin Wentian's name became a symbol of Chu. He didn't have any official position in Chu, but with a single thought, he could determine the ownership of Chu. In fact, the entire Grand Xia had submitted to him. That vast and powerful Grand Xia, the 9 mystical palace that once governed Chu was merely a minor power. But now, everything was under Qin Wentian's control. Not only that, it was rumored that Qin Wentian's power was no longer limited to Grand Xia. In fact, there was a place known as the Royal Sacred Region where Qin Wenyan was extremely famous. However, at this level, the people of Chu had no way to come into contact with him. Even after everything ended, the people of Chu were still unable to calm down. For a very long period of time, they were still immersed in the shock brought to them by this wedding. To the people of Chu, this was a baptism, allowing them to have a deeper understanding of the outside world. Many youths started to think of venturing out into the world, roaming the heavens and earth that belonged to them. Their gazes were no longer limited to a single country like Chu. And among these people, the Emperor's Star Academy was the most outstanding. They had personally witnessed the grand wedding and were the witnesses. They could be considered as the batch of outstanding geniuses in Chu. They started to dream of a day when their names would resound throughout the world. 3 days later, the dust had already settled. On the day of the wedding, Qin Wenyan and Mo Qingqing sent off many of their loved ones and friends. At the same time, they told Fairy Qingmei and the rest to return to Grand Xia. Qin Wenyan and Mo Qingqing brought Little Rascal along as they roamed around Grand Xia, relaxing. They didn't even bother to cultivate and only enjoyed life for 3 days. They roamed around the mountains and rivers, strolled on the lakes, and glided across the boundless glaciers. Although it was only a short 3 days, Qin Wenyan and Mo Qingqing's footprints were all over Grand Xia. Gingku, the ancient kingdom of Grand Xia. Today, the atmosphere was brimming with vitality. The news of Qin Wenyan unifying Grand Xia had long circulated around Gingku, and was even circulating around the entire Grand Xia. Now that the ancient kingdom had already been rebuilt, Qin Wenyan could even change the name of the new kingdom, using his surname as the name. There were already rumors circulating around Gingku that the new kingdom might be renamed by Qin Wenyan, the Qin dynasty. Today, in a vast area beneath the ancient palace, the various ascendants of Grand Xia led their troops to pay their respects. From afar, there were countless spectators watching silently as their hearts pounded. Today, was Grand Xia going to undergo a change of dynasty? This was going to be a brand new era. Ever since the destruction of the ancient kingdom, Grand Xia had never seen such a grand scene before. Celestial phenomenon ascendants gathered here, leading their clans and sects to pay their respects. Up ahead, on the majestic flight of stairs carved with dragons and phoenixes, 2 silhouettes could be seen slowly walking over, standing in front of the ancient palace. These 2 were extremely young, yet the people below all bowed respectfully, not daring to show the slightest bit of disrespect. They had already experienced Qin Wentian's methods, and now, none of them dared to do anything disrespectful. On the stairs, Fairy Qing, Old Xing, and the experts sent by Yi Qingyun all stood there. In the eyes of the experts from the Jiang clan and Thousand Ju alliance, unconcealable excitement could be seen. This was a new dynasty, they didn't choose the wrong side. Qin Wenyan surveyed the crowd below. His heart had never been so calm before. Grand Xia was unified, he didn't let down the Xia Emperor or the Azure Emperor. Chapter 690. The unification of Grand Xia shook the entire world. The name of Qin Wenyan once again caused towering waves of commotion in Grand Xia. And this time around, Qin Wentian's identity was that of the Emperor of Grand Xia. He was the one who unified Grand Xia, ending thousands of years of internal strife, causing all the transcendent powers to submit to him. Such an achievement caused the people of Grand Xia to sigh in admiration. Who wouldn't know what the name Qin Wenyan represented? Thinking back to a few years ago when his name shook Grand Xia, it was because of the heavenly fate-ranking battle. Because he wielded the demon sword and went to the Pill Emperor Hall. Who would have thought that in such a short period of time, he would become an unparalleled character in Grand Xia? Qin Wenyan was known as the Qin Emperor by the people of Grand Xia, but there were also people who referred to him as the Demon Lord. Because when Qin Wenyan battled, his demonic qi towered up into the sky. His entire person was incomparably demonic, akin to a descendant of a demon king. And because of his demon-level talent, nobody in Grand Xia could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. However, no matter what the outside world called him, Qin Wenyan didn't care. After handing over the matters of Grand Xia to Fairy Qingmei issued several orders, starting to reorganize Grand Xia. Grand Xia would still be divided into 9 prefectures. The various transcendent powers would no longer be able to control the 9 continents easily. They had to start a comprehensive reorganization, establishing a strict selection system for talents. At the same time, they had to establish a martial arts academy in the 9 continents. At the same time, the transcendent powers had to set an example, becoming the leaders of the academies and guiding the younger generations. At the same time, they had to set up a reward and punishment system so that the transcendent powers wouldn't be able to do as they pleased. Grand Xia was viewed as a desolate land of desolation. It was simply too weak. Any transcendent power in the royal sacred region could easily sweep through Grand Xia. Qin Wenyan didn't wish for Grand Xia to be swept away so easily in the future. However, they all understood a logic. Those old fellows of Grand Xia no longer had any hope. Their hopes were all placed on their descendants. Only when the youths were strong would Grand Xia be strong in the future. Even if they left the royal sacred region, as long as their descendants continued to support Grand Xia, not forgetting the kindness Grand Xia had shown them, there would definitely be a day when Grand Xia would return to its former glory. Not only that, Qin Wenyan even treated the ultimate arts of Grand Xia as the ultimate treasures of the 9 prefectures academy. For those with supreme talent, they would have the opportunity to cultivate those top-tier innate techniques. The various transcendent powers of Grand Xia also wanted to bring out their ultimate arts. Naturally, Fairy Qingmei knew that this still required time. In the great hall of the royal palace of Grand Xia, Qin Wenyan sat in his seat. Numerous reports were sent to him. Qin Wenyan patiently flipped through them, and the more he read, the more shocked he felt. After a long time, Qin Wenyan placed the reports down. Drawing in a deep breath, he wrote a few large words on the table. Star River Association. This thick stack of reports was all about the Star River Association. This was a power that Qin Wenyan had interacted with in the Sky Harmony City as well as the royal capital of Chu. It was so powerful that it caused him to feel fear in his heart. According to the records, in the vast territories governed by the Grand Xia Empire, there was a Star River Association in every city. The headquarters of the Star River Association was located in the Ginku continent. Qin Wenyan had interacted with the Star River Association in the Moon continent before and rejected their invitation. His impression of the Star River Association was extremely bad. In the Sky Harmony City, he had also interacted with the Star River Association. His impression of the Star River Association was similarly bad, and there were even many conflicts between them. In truth, the records of the Star River Association were the same as his impression of the Star River Association. Although they seemed low profile, they were tyrannical to the extreme. Su Zhe, one of the top 3 rankers of the Heavenly Fate rankings 30 years ago. His talent in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions was extremely high. But because he rejected the invitation of the Star River Association, he disappeared 3 days later. This was the record of one of the reports, and it was clearly recorded down. In these reports, there were still some blurry details that couldn't be ascertained to be the work of the Star River Association. However, Qin Wenyan felt that there was an 80 to 90% chance that it was the work of the Star River Association. The Azure Emperor's death back then had already been ascertained that the most fatal factor was the assassination attempt by the Star River Association. The situation was very similar to what he was experiencing now. Many transcendent powers had invited the Star River Association to act. Not only that, it was the same person, the Dark Shadow Sovereign. The Dark Shadow Sovereign was the leader of the Dark Shadow branch of the Star River Association in the Grand Xia Empire. He was the most mysterious and most powerful assassin in Grand Xia. Malignant tumor. 2 words appeared in Qin Wenyan's mind. The Star River Association was definitely the malignant tumor of Grand Xia. Although they didn't seem to be fighting for power and didn't reveal their true strength, just like how they were in Chu and Sky Harmony City, The truth was that they were extremely arrogant and conceited. Not only that, the members of the Star River Association that Qin Wendian had met before were all extremely despicable. An example was Murin back then, who directly sold him and the members of the Qin clan to the Yi clan, almost causing their deaths. The hatred between him and the Star River Association had been formed ever since he was a youth. One couldn't help but say that this was a type of fate. Hence, regardless of whether it was for public or private reasons, he had to pull out this malignant tumor. Qin Wendian's perception gushed out, swiftly enveloping the entire royal palace. Not long after, Fairy Qing, Old Xing, and several others appeared in the great hall where Qin Wendian was in. "We pay our respects to your majesty." Fairy Qing Mei and the others greeted. "You guys don't have to be so polite in private, just call me Wendian." Qin Wendian smiled. Fairy Qing Mei giggled. "Why? Are you still reading the dossiers regarding the Star River Association?" I plan to leave after settling this matter. Do you guys have any objections?" Qin Wendian stared at Fairy Qing Mei and the others. Old Xing frowned as he stared at Qin Wendian. "Wendian, according to the dossiers, the power of the Star River Association is so strong that it's terrifying. Not only that, their sphere of influence isn't just limited to Grand Xia. If not, it's impossible for them to infiltrate so deeply. It's easy to overlook this power. The Star River Association is like a venomous snake. Normally, if you don't come into contact with them, you wouldn't even be able to sense their existence. But the moment they set their sights on you, you would become their prey." Fairy Qingmei also had a heavy expression on her face. Only after they read through all the scrolls did they truly understand what sort of power the Star River Association was. In the past, their understanding of the Star River Association was actually so incomplete. Although this sounded somewhat ridiculous, such a thing had actually happened before their very eyes. An expression of contemplation appeared on Qin Wendian's face. He had also considered Old Xing's words. His conjecture was the same as Old Xing's. The power of the Star River Association wasn't just limited to Grand Xia. Their shadows could be seen in Grand Shang, Grand Zhou, and even the entire royal sacred region. It was just that they were usually too low profile and didn't attract any attention. They didn't even appear in the list of superpowers that were vying for power. Such a group of people was the most dangerous. According to what the Sure ancestor said, the intelligence network of the Star River Association should be extremely powerful. Most probably, the Star River Association knows everything about me. If not, they wouldn't be willing to pay such a hefty price. If this is the case, my name should have long been recorded in the Star River Association's dossiers. They should also be aware of everything that happened in the Chu country, Qin Wendian murmured to himself. Qin Wendian slowly spoke as he analyzed. If that's the case, if I destroy the Star River Association in Grand Xia, the upper echelons of the Star River Association wouldn't target anyone else but me. Fairy Qingmei and the rest had solemn expressions on their faces. Qin Wendian's analysis wasn't without logic. If they wanted to destroy the Star River Association, it was clear that Qin Wendian was determined to do so. How about this? Let's start from the 9 prefectures and wipe out the Star River Association. Leave the Ginkgo continent to me, and in order to prevent the Star River Association from implicating Grand Xia, we won't kill anyone from the Star River Association. We will only use my name to announce to the world that I, Qin Wendian, will not allow any Star River Association to exist in Grand Xia. I will destroy all of them. Qin Wendian's eyes flashed with sharpness. If this was the case, the Star River Association should understand his intentions. If they wanted revenge, they could find him, Qin Wendian. Fairy Qingmei's heart trembled when she saw the sharpness in Qin Wendian's eyes. This fellow, once he made up his mind, he would execute it immediately. Right. Fairy Qingmei, Old Xing, and the rest nodded as they retreated from the Great Hall, beginning the final mission Qin Wendian had assigned to them before he left Grand Xia. One day later, the 9 prefectures of Grand Xia simultaneously launched an attack on the Star River Association. They wanted to destroy all branches of the Star River Association, but they wouldn't kill anyone from the Star River Association. His Majesty had ordered that the Star River Association was not to exist in Grand Xia. This was the first iron-blooded command that Qin Wenyan had issued after he unified Grand Xia. In Ginkgo, outside the Star River Association, a terrifying aura enveloped the entire Star River Association. In the main hall of the Star River Association, a white-robed silhouette stood there. This silhouette had an ancient sword strapped to his back, exuding an unexcelled aura. Bzzz, bzzz, bzzz. Numerous silhouettes flickered. They were none other than the Hall Lords of the Star River Association. Their gazes were fixed on Qin Wenyan, as coldness flickered in their eyes. Qin Wenyan, what do you mean by this? The Hall Lord of the Star River Association was an expert in weaponsmithing. He was clad in fiery robes as he stared at Qin Wenyan. Qin Wenyan's gaze swept over, landing on a gray-robed figure. This figure was none other than the Dark Shadow Sovereign. Qin Wenyan, I've already forgiven you for the assassination attempt. From now onwards, my Star River Association will not interfere with your affairs. The Dark Shadow Sovereign narrowed his eyes as he stared at Qin Wenyan. Since you didn't kill me, you will not interfere with my affairs. Qin Wenyan stared at the Dark Shadow Sovereign, after which, a terrifying sword might gushed forth from him, transforming into a terrifying tempest that ravaged the heavens and earth. Gotcha! Qin Wenyan stomped his foot, causing terrifying cracks to appear on the surface of the ancient hall. Qin Wenyan, do you know what you are doing? The countenance of the Dark Shadow Sovereign was extremely cold. From today onwards, the Star River Association is no longer allowed to exist in Grand Xia. Qin Wenyan lifted his foot and stomped it down again. A terrifying destructive might bore down on him, causing the ancient hall below to crumble. Qin Wenyan, I know you have the Medicine Sovereign supporting you from the back. But let me give you a piece of advice. Let bygones be bygones. In fact, I can even forget about what happened today. If not, no matter how strong your background is, there will be no place for you in the royal sacred region. The voice of the Dark Shadow Sovereign turned cold. If you still don't give up, no matter where you go, you will die for sure. The Hall Lord of the Star River Association icily threatened. This was the first time the Star River Association was provoked. Chapter 691. Qin Wenyan swept his gaze over and instantly sensed the cultivation bases of the Star River Lord and the Dark Shadow Sovereign. The Star River Lord was at the second level of celestial phenomenon. In the perspective of Grand Xia, his strength was at the peak. As for the Dark Shadow Sovereign, he was even stronger. His aura was at the third level of celestial phenomenon, and in addition to the fact that his constellation was stronger compared to the other ascendants of Grand Xia, the Dark Shadow Sovereign's strength could be considered the strongest in the entire Grand Xia. Once an uncontrollable existence appeared, the other ascendants would immediately think of hiring him to assassinate them. To the Dark Shadow Sovereign, as long as someone could afford the price, he would kill them. In this Grand Xia, he was the King of Darkness, the uncrowned king. In truth, given the Dark Shadow Sovereign's strength, he could already be transferred to the royal sacred region. However, his position wouldn't be too high. He was already very old, and it was impossible for his cultivation base to climb any higher. There was no meaning for him to stay in the middle of the royal sacred region, as those in the upper echelons wouldn't favor him. He wouldn't be able to obtain any benefits either. Hence, he chose to be the King of Darkness in Grand Xia. The Star River Lord was different. He was sent here to manage the Star River Association. He was only a few hundred years old and could already be considered very young. Not only that, he was also a Grandmaster weaponsmith with boundless potential. By gathering resources and accumulating experience, he would be able to ascend to a higher stage sooner or later. But no matter who it was, once the Star River Association of Grand Xia was destroyed, they would have to bear the crime of incompetence and be punished when they returned. In this land, the history of the Star River Association was even more ancient compared to the Grand Xia Empire. Today, for the first time, there was someone who dared to behave atrociously in the headquarters of the Star River Association. This person was none other than the person who was like the sun in the sky, the heavens chosen, who was revered by countless people in Grand Xia, the Emperor of Grand Xia, Qin Wenyan. But no matter how glorious he was, once he dared to destroy the Star River Association, there would only be a single path awaiting him: death. Dark Shadow Sovereign, stay behind. As for the others, scram. The sword intent radiating from Qin Wenyan towered up into the skies as a boundless sword chi tempest enveloped the headquarters of the Star River Association. After which, his foot stomped downwards once more as a supreme sword might gushed forth, destroying everything in its path. The great hall was reduced to dust, completely destroyed. You actually have the aura of a celestial phenomenon ascendant? Have you broken through to celestial phenomenon? The countenance of the Dark Shadow Sovereign was extremely unsightly to behold. After Grand Xia was unified, there were people who guessed that Qin Wenyan had already broken through to the celestial phenomenon realm. But when he saw Qin Wenyan, he had no way to see through his cultivation base. It was only until now, when Qin Wenyan unleashed the might of a celestial phenomenon, that he could clearly sense that this was indeed the might of a celestial phenomenon. A celestial phenomenon ascendant that wasn't even 30 years of age? The countenance of the Dark Shadow Sovereign turned incredibly unsightly to behold. In fact, there was even a hint of jealousy in his heart. He had lived for over 10,000 years and was still stuck at the peak of the third level of celestial phenomenon, unable to break through to the next level. But Qin Wenyan was so young, yet he was already a celestial phenomenon ascendant. What was his limit? It was simply unimaginable. You originally had a bright future ahead of you. Why must you seek death? The Star River Association isn't a place you can afford to antagonize. The Star River Lord coldly threatened. As a member of the Star River Association, he knew very well how powerful their Star River Association was. Although the Royal Sacred Sect was the hegemon of a region, so what of it? The Royal Sacred Sect still had to acknowledge the existence of the Star River Association. In the history of the Royal Sacred Region, there had never been anyone who dared to say that the Star River Association wasn't allowed to exist. Not even generations of sacred emperors dared to do so. Qin Wenyan was the first to do so. He was merely the ruler of Grand Xia, yet he wanted to forbid the existence of the Star River Association. You guys talk too much nonsense. If you still don't scram, I will kill you all. Qin Wenyan's countenance gleamed with a terrifying sharpness. His entire person was akin to a supreme sword, penetrating through everything. At this moment, there were many experts from the Star River Association surrounding him, yet when they stared at the silhouette of that young man, none of them dared to step forward to fight. This scene caused those who were watching from afar to sigh in their hearts. What was the meaning of absolute magnificence? Qin Wenyan stood in the air, intimidating the entire Star River Association. As expected of a man who could cause the various hegemons of Grand Xia to submit to him. The halo of light around him was simply too resplendent. Back then I didn't manage to kill you. I truly want to see if you will unleash your sword might again today, injuring yourself first before injuring me. The Dark Shadow Sovereign stepped out, unleashing his dual constellations at the same time. In the blink of an eye, a starry space appeared above Qin Wenyan's head. An incomparably terrifying vine could be seen wriggling about, directly enveloping this entire space. Boom! Another resplendent and terrifying constellation erupted forth. This was none other than the constellation released by the Star River Lord. Within the space created by the ancient vines, a fiery space that resembled magma appeared. Numerous terrifying divine weapons that were branded red could be seen within the magma, exuding an incomparably terrifying might. This was none other than the constellation of the Star River Lord. Qin Wenyan could sense that just based on the strength of the Star River Association's Hall Lord, no one in Grand Xia would be able to contend against him. The constellations of those hegemons weren't on the same level as the Star River Association's Hall Lord. Since you have already broken through to celestial phenomenon, why don't you show me your constellation? The voice of the Dark Shadow Sovereign rang out. His body had already entered the second constellation, his voice was everywhere. Qin Wenyan inclined his head and stared at the constellations of the two experts. This constellation was extremely dazzling, and right in the center was the divine might manifested by the constellation. At the edges of the constellation, A faint golden glow could be seen. Qin Wenyan knew that this glow was the glow of an astral soul. Constellations were formed from the astral souls of stellar martial cultivators. Hence, the glow of the constellation represented which heavenly layer the astral soul originated from. The dense golden glow indicated that both of their constellations originated from the sixth heavenly layer. This should be the astral souls condensed by the constellation they condensed when they broke through to celestial phenomenon. In other words, their fifth astral soul originated from the sixth heavenly layer. It was just that in terms of the strength of their astral souls, Qin Wenyan didn't have any advantage over the Dark Shadow Sovereign. The astral soul he condensed was his second astral soul, the Great Dream astral soul that originated from the fifth heavenly layer. As you wish. Behind Qin Wenyan, a shadow gradually manifested. A terrifying tempest started to churn the space, enveloping his body as an intense dream force gushed forth. As expected, the first constellation you condensed must have been condensed from the astral souls you condensed before you broke through to celestial phenomenon. No matter how high your talent is, your astral soul is merely from the fifth heavenly layer. How can you fight against us? The Dark Shadow Sovereign sinisterly spoke. After which, rustling sounds rang out as terrifying ancient vines shot towards Qin Wenyan. Not only him, the Star River Lord also acted. Within his constellation, numerous crimson divine weapons manifested, shooting towards Qin Wenyan. Their might towered up into the sky, as though they wanted to annihilate all their enemies. It's more than enough to deal with you guys. The constellation behind Qin Wenyan was even more dazzling. The tempest grew even more terrifying. He calmly stood there, allowing the ancient vines and lava divine weapons to rush over. However, a destructive tempest manifested around him, transforming into a vortex of destruction that could kill everything. Those vines and lava divine weapons were all shattered into pieces, unable to get close to Qin Wenyan. What a powerful attack! The Dark Shadow Sovereign and the Star River Lord both felt shock in their hearts. The attack power of the constellation Qin Wenyan condensed was extremely terrifying. It was like a constellation born for offense, using offense as defense. Since you guys want to see my constellation, I will grant it to you. Watch carefully. A divine light erupted forth from Qin Wenyan's eyes. Instantly, resplendent astral light radiated forth as though a pair of eyes were opening and closing in the space between heaven and earth. At that instant, there was nothing around Qin Wenyan. However, the Dark Shadow Sovereign and the Star River Lord discovered that their constellations were enveloped by a mysterious energy. Dreamworld constellation, omnipresent. Qin Wenyan slowly spoke, his voice causing the hearts of the two of them to tremble. Was this the first time Qin Wenyan condensed his constellation? Dreamworld constellation, they discovered that they had indeed been brought into a mysterious space. Now, let me show you what a true attack from a constellation is. As the sound of Qin Wenyan's voice faded, a tempest manifested in the entire Dreamworld constellation. It was as though there were countless motes of destructive light in this space that were stirred up. Puchi! The ancient vines shattered unceasingly, and the divine weapons that erupted forth from the lava were directly destroyed. In this space, Qin Wenyan was the overlord. I want to leave. The Star River Lord sensed danger. He retreated and lifted his palms to attack, only to discover that there seemed to be no boundary to this constellation. How could there be a boundary in a dream? This constellation was boundless and boundless. You want to leave? Since you have chosen to fight, just die. Qin Wenyan stared at the Star River Lord. After which, his palms grabbed out in the air. Instantly, around the Star River Lord, the boundless destructive motes of light actually converged into a gigantic palm imprint that blotted out the skies, directly smashing towards him. No. The Star River Lord turned pale. He was the Star River Lord in charge of the Star River Association in Grand Xia. He had only cultivated for a few hundred years and his potential was limitless. How could he die here? Boom! The destructive attack directly enveloped the Star River Palace Lord's body, turning it into dust. An instant later, his constellation vanished as well. A series of hurried breathing sounds rang out. It was the Dark Shadow Sovereign. Right now, although he was concealed within his constellation, he could still feel his entire body turning cold. How could this be? How could this be? How could the first constellation he condensed be so terrifying? Even with the guidance of a supreme expert, there was no way he could condense a constellation the first time he condensed it, right? Could it be that his constellation was formed by fusing 4 types of true intents together with his astral souls? Only then would he be able to insta-kill all constellations at the same level as him. When he thought of this, the Dark Shadow Sovereign felt even more unbearable in his heart. How could a young man who wasn't even 30 years of age have such accomplishments? The dream world was boundless. How could he break this constellation? Chapter 692. Not long ago, the Dark Shadow Sovereign had attempted to assassinate Qin Wenyan. At that time, his dual constellation trapped Qin Wenyan within, frenziedly torturing Qin Wenyan, almost taking Qin Wenyan's life. The Qin Wenyan at that time, other than igniting his own self to unleash the immortal vanquishing swordplay, he had no idea how to break the Dark Shadow Sovereign's constellation. But now, the situation seemed to be reversed. Similarly, the Dark Shadow Sovereign unleashed his constellation, but this time around, it was the Dark Shadow Sovereign who had no idea how to break Qin Wenyan's constellation. Any celestial phenomenon ascendant would have their own unique constellation. From the battle between Qin Wenyan and the Dark Shadow Sovereign, one could faintly see the countless transformations of constellations. The powerful Dark Shadow Sovereign had a cultivation base at the 3rd level of celestial phenomenon, but Qin Wenyan had just condensed his own constellation not too long ago, and the Dark Shadow Sovereign already felt the threat of death looming over him. At this moment, the Dark Shadow Sovereign was still hidden within his 2nd constellation. Rustling sounds rang out unceasingly as ancient vines frenziedly attacked Qin Wenyan. However, the vines that extended out from his constellation were directly shredded apart by the fearsome destructive particles. Qin Wenyan inclined his head, staring at the darkness of his constellation as he coldly spoke. "It's useless. If you want to injure me, you have to personally assassinate me. You won't be able to do it if you simply use your constellation." His cold voice was filled with tyranny and confidence. That tempest soared up into the air and started to stir the constellation of the Dark Shadow Sovereign. Regardless of the ancient vine constellation or the netherworld constellation, in his dreamworld constellation, Qin Wenyan wanted to see where the Dark Shadow Sovereign could hide. Within his dreamworld constellation, the Dark Shadow Sovereign's ancient vine constellation was completely crippled. It was completely useless. How could he trap Qin Wenyan? Right now, he was trapped by Qin Wenyan within the Dreamworld constellation. There was no way for him to exit even if he wanted to. As for attacking, the ancient vine constellation's attacks were all insta-killed by the destructive particles contained within the Dreamworld constellation. Right now, the Dark Shadow Sovereign could only borrow the power of his 2nd constellation. Right now, he was still concealed within it, only to see that at this moment, the constellation transformed into a river of darkness that gushed towards Qin Wenyan from all directions. Qin Wenyan stood proudly in the sky. Destructive air currents swirled around him and swept towards the river of darkness. Shadows of Dark Shadow Sovereigns appeared and attacked Qin Wenyan at the same time. Boom! Qin Wenyan took a step forward, and a force that could suppress everything bloomed. Qin Wenyan seemed to have transformed into a god of war, insufferably arrogant. Destroy! With a roar of rage, all the shadows around him were destroyed. The true body of the Dark Shadow Sovereign appeared as he stabbed out with a long spear that resembled the netherworld. Black-colored devilish energy revolved around the long spear as a black vortex manifested, wanting to devour Qin Wenyan within. The size of this vortex was so great that it could instantly devour 100 people. Qin Wenyan inclined his head slightly. He could see the cold and gloomy eyes of the Dark Shadow Sovereign. A terrifying light enveloped his body, and he was like a fiend god. With a roar of rage, he blasted out with his palms, manifesting numerous heaven-suppressing palm imprints at the same time. At this instant, One could see boundless destructive tempests flowing towards the vortex of darkness, frenziedly clashing with each other. Rumbling sounds of destruction shook the heavens and earth. The Dark Shadow Sovereign roared in rage again and again. However, Qin Wenyan took a step forward and directly entered the vortex. Many shadows appeared at the same time as the Dark Shadow Sovereign launched another attack. His feet stomped on the ground and his palms blasted the sky. In all directions, streams of destructive light brushed past, even more resplendent than the stars. Soft sounds rang out. The Dark Shadow Sovereign felt his internal organs shattering from the pressure. He retreated explosively only to see Qin Wenyan snorting coldly. He grabbed out with his hand as a boundless destructive might enveloped the Dark Shadow Sovereign, trapping him within the gigantic palm imprint. Qin Wenyan, your time of death will not be far. The Dark Shadow Sovereign understood that there was no hope of survival. He let out a roar of rage. The Dark Shadow Sovereign would definitely kill him. Destroy! Qin Wenyan's palms slammed down. Sizzling sounds rang out as boundless destructive light directly drilled into the Dark Shadow Sovereign's body, tearing it apart. Many interspatial rings flew out from his body, but with a wave of his hand, Qin Wenyan kept all of them into his interspatial pouch. The Dark Shadow Sovereign and the Star River Lord of the Star River Association were both extremely wealthy, right? After killing the two supreme experts, Qin Wenyan waved his hands as the constellation in the dream world vanished. In an instant, the entire space returned to a state of tranquility, as though nothing had happened at all. In the Star River Association, numerous gazes were focused on Qin Wenyan. That magnificent silhouette still stood proudly in the air. However, the Star River Lord and the Dark Shadow Sovereign had already vanished forever. This caused the hearts of everyone in the Star River Association to tremble violently. Another two supreme experts of Grand Xia had fallen. Not only that, these two were true experts who were hidden in the shadows, and were even stronger compared to the ascendants of Grand Xia on the surface. However, no one could obstruct this supreme genius who unified Grand Xia. He wanted to unify Grand Xia, forcing all the ascendants to submit to him. No one dared to defy his orders. He wanted the Star River Association to have no way to establish a foothold in Grand Xia. Similarly, no one in Grand Xia dared to defy his orders. Even the Star River Lord and the Dark Shadow Sovereign of the Star River Association were killed without mercy. They were forcefully wiped out by Qin Wenyan. At this moment, Qin Wenyan's gaze swept over the members of the Star River Association. His cold voice rang out once more. From today onwards, I want the Star River Association to cease to exist in Grand Xia. Scram. As the sound of Qin Wenyan's voice faded, the members of the Star River Association dispersed, leaving this place. The Star River Lord and the Dark Shadow Sovereign had already died in the hands of Qin Wenyan. What else could they do? Fighting against Qin Wenyan was simply courting death. Some of the upper echelons of the Star River Association coldly glanced at Qin Wenyan before leaving with reluctance. Their eyes flickered with killing intent. When they reported this to their superiors, Qin Wenyan would die without a doubt. Qin Wenyan would pay a price for his actions today. Qin Wenyan left and returned to the royal palace of Grand Xia. But soon after, another commotion occurred in Grand Xia. Hundreds of branches of the Star River Association were uprooted and completely destroyed. However, they didn't kill anyone. They just didn't allow the Star River Association to establish a foothold in Grand Xia. Only now did the people of Grand Xia realize how terrifying the power of the Star River Association was. The deeds of the Star River Association and the Dark Shadow Sovereign also surfaced, shocking everyone. Even the upper echelons of Grand Xia easily neglected the existence of the Star River Association, let alone ordinary people. This low-profile and mysterious power was actually so vast and tyrannical. Many people had died because they offended them. The people of Grand Xia couldn't help but to applaud Qin Wenyan's decision. The resolution of the ruler of Grand Xia was truly something ordinary people wouldn't be able to match up to. After this matter, Qin Wenyan quietly cultivated in Grand Xia, no longer interfering with external affairs. He entered a state of closed-door seclusion. Although he had already stepped into the celestial phenomenon realm, Qin Wenyan still had many things he wanted to do. Condensing his fifth astral soul, cultivating the fiend god heavenly suppression art, comprehending offensive innate techniques, etc. As for Grand Xia, the Star River Association had already been uprooted. The authority of Grand Xia was also stable. At the very least, there was no one or major power that could shake the prestige of the Grand Xia Empire. Naturally, Qin Wenyan's philosophy was to nurture talents for Grand Xia, allowing Grand Xia to prosper and grow stronger. He didn't care about maintaining his authority. With such a philosophy, he believed that as long as time passed, Grand Xia would only grow stronger and stronger. Because of Qin Wenyan's existence, in the royal sacred region far away from Grand Xia, two transcendent powers were currently in conflict. One of the transcendent powers was none other than the hegemon of the Grand Xia Empire, the Royal Sacred Sect. The Royal Sacred Sect had governed Grand Xia for tens of thousands of years and was incomparably powerful. But recently, the Royal Sacred Region encountered an unprecedented provocation. Qin Wenyan domineeringly killed Xia Xing in the Royal Sacred Sect and left safely. Because of this, the people of the Royal Sacred Sect couldn't swallow this humiliation. Hence, the grand wedding of Qin Wenyan happened in Chu. However, that day was the darkest day in the history of the Royal Sacred Sect. All the experts of the Royal Sacred Sect who went there, including high-stage celestial phenomenon ascendants, didn't return alive. Such a matter had never happened before in the history of the Royal Sacred Sect. If this matter was circulated to the Royal Sacred Region, it was unknown how intense the waves of commotion it would cause. Because the location of the incident was in Chu, the distance was simply too far. Hence, the transcendent powers of the Royal Sacred Region didn't know of this. However, in the internal department of the Royal Sacred Sect, this matter had already caused great waves of commotion. During these days, many people came to pay their respects to the Sacred Emperor outside the Sacred Royal Hall, but the Sacred Emperor had yet to manifest his will. Until today, outside the Sacred Royal Hall, an incomparably powerful fluctuation could be felt. After which, a silhouette appeared in and out of existence, shining with a resplendent light. We pay our respects to the Sacred Emperor. Everyone knelt down. What's the matter? A voice drifted out from that Qin Wenyan. Qin Wenyan held his grand wedding in Chu. The experts of my Royal Sacred Sect who went there were all killed. A voice trembled, causing a terrifying might to permeate the air. The Sacred Emperor coldly continued, I've already said that the matter back then will end here. Who told you guys to take revenge? Sacred Emperor, we have to avenge the humiliation we suffered back then. This place is the Royal Sacred Region. Someone inclined his head as he spoke. What do you guys know? Frogs at the bottom of a well. The Sacred Emperor coldly replied. The Medicine Sovereign is already on the same level as me. As the sound of his voice faded, the experts of the Royal Sacred Sect all trembled violently. This news to them was like a thunderbolt from the blue. The Royal Sacred Sect had always been the hegemon of the Royal Sacred Region. But because their Sacred Emperor was unrivaled in the Royal Sacred Region, a legendary existence. And now, the Sacred Emperor was telling them that the Medicine Sovereign was also an expert of the same level. They finally understood why that undying old man didn't die every time his lifespan was about to end, and why the Medicine Sovereign dared to go to the Royal Sacred Sect to protect Qin Wenyan. Initially, they thought it was because of the Medicine Sovereign's qualifications. But from the looks of it now, they were too stupid. In front of a legendary existence, what did qualifications count for? Those below that level didn't even have the qualifications to speak to the Sacred Emperor. Since the Medicine Sovereign dared to appear, it meant that he had already stepped into that level. However, the Medicine Sovereign went overboard this time around. The Royal Sacred Region is still the world of the Royal Sacred Sect. Since he dares to do this, you guys go and kill Qin Wenyan. If the Medicine Sovereign interferes again, report back to me. The Sacred Emperor's voice was ice cold. He initially didn't want to bother with the matters here, but he didn't expect such a twist to occur. But since this is the case, so what if a junior has outstanding talent? We obey the sacred emperor's command. The eyes of everyone flickered with sharpness as they obeyed. Chapter 693. Within the sacred royal city, there was a vast stretch of ancient palaces. This place had countless years of history, even longer compared to the royal sacred sect. This vast ancient hall had witnessed the rise and fall of the major powers of the royal sacred region. In fact, even before this world was known as the royal sacred region, this hall had already existed. When the first generation sacred emperor of the royal sacred sect ruled the world, the name of the royal sacred region was changed to the royal sacred region. Countless major powers in this region had changed, but only this ancient hall remained unchanged. Even the first generation sacred emperor of the royal sacred sect silently approved of its existence, not daring to destroy it. This place was none other than the headquarters of the Star River Association in the royal sacred region. Today, there were people from the Grand Xia branch who returned with a piece of news. All the branches of the Star River Association in Grand Xia had been destroyed. Qin Wenyan, who unified Grand Xia, didn't permit the existence of the Star River Association within the borders of Grand Xia. When this news spread out, the shock and anger of the experts of the Star River Association was even more intense compared to the royal sacred sect. How many years had it been? The Star River Association had infiltrated every inch of land under the heavens. In any large city, they would set up a branch of the Star River Association. This incomparably secretive organization operated day and night, and had the most powerful information network in the royal sacred region. They were able to see through everything in the royal sacred region. For every outstanding character, how strong they were, what level their talent was at, how strong their background was. Unless it was extremely secretive, nothing could be hidden from the eyes of the Star River Association. With regards to the information about Qin Wenyan, the Star River Association had made many changes. Qin Wenyan, whose name shook the entire royal sacred region and who became the overlord of Grand Xia, had long since become a character that the Star River Association paid close attention to. Right now, the information about him was recorded in a transparent scroll in the headquarters of the Star River Association. In the headquarters of the Star River Association, only those characters who stood at the pinnacle of the Grand Xia Empire would be recorded in a transparent scroll. For example, the sacred emperor of the royal sacred sect, the various vice-sect leaders, the medicine sovereign, the leaders of the 9 great sects, etc. Right now, the scroll that recorded Qin Wenyan was the same as them. From this, one could see how much importance the Star River Association placed on Qin Wenyan. At this moment, in the headquarters of the Star River Association, there was a person currently flipping through the information regarding Qin Wenyan. From what happened in Heaven's Wall City, to the conflict between him and Murin, to the assassination attempt by the Dark Shadow Sovereign, it was very easy to tell that Qin Wenyan didn't have a good impression of the Star River Association. As for why Qin Wenyan wanted to uproot the Star River Association in Grand Xia, it was very easy to understand. The records of Qin Wenyan's strength were also very detailed. It even included the fact that he could transform into a rock with the demonic divinity sacrificial rite and use the immortal vanquishing sword. Only one column was rather vague, and that was about Qin Wenyan's background. Qin Wenyan grew up in the Qin mansion of Chu Nation's Heaven's Wall City. His adoptive father, Qin Chuan, could be ignored. Qin Wenyan's other godfather, the human emperor of Yi country, Yi Qingyan. His wife was the disciple of the medicine sovereign, Mo Qingqing. Qin Wenyan's background was unknown. Appendix: during Qin Wenyan's wedding in Chu Nation, a mysterious expert appeared. He was a disabled person who raised Qin Wenyan. He brought along many masked experts, and his strength is unknown. Appendix: in the Moon continent, when Qin Wenyan slaughtered the Pill Emperor Hall with the demon sword, a mysterious expert appeared and rescued him. As for who it was, it's unknown. It was unknown who taught Qin Wenyan the immortal technique and sword art. All of these pointed to the fact that Qin Wenyan might have an extraordinary background. However, even the intelligence network of the Star River Association was unable to find out anything. They could only speculate that he might be the orphan of an extremely powerful existence. However, no matter how powerful Qin Wentian's background was, how could he be stronger than the Star River Association? As the Grand Hall Lord of the Star River Association in the Royal Sacred Region, he was sent here by the upper echelons. How could he not know what sort of existence the Star River Association was? How could a mere orphan of an extremely powerful existence dare to provoke them? However, his authority was limited. As the Grand Hall Lord of the Royal Sacred Region, he had a mission to accomplish. Every 100 years, he had to send resources and nurture geniuses to the Royal Sacred Region. This was his responsibility, and the authority he had no way to surpass the Royal Sacred Region. Once he encountered an existence he couldn't defeat in the Royal Sacred Region, it would be extremely troublesome for him. After all, if he reported such a matter to the upper echelons, he, as the Grand Hall Lord, would undoubtedly be doing a bad job. This was also the reason why, although the Star River Association had a transcendent background, they still kept a low profile in the Royal Sacred Region. They wouldn't go out to antagonize others, nor would they fight for the position of the hegemon. Their goal was to complete the mission given to them by the upper echelons. He took out a brush and a piece of paper, after which he wrote a letter. With a wave of his hand, the letter floated outside as he commanded, "Send this letter to Qin Wenin of Grand Xia." "Roger," the person outside replied, after which the sound of footsteps could be heard. In the Royal Sacred Region, within the Immortal Palace, Di Tian stared at the red-haired old man in front of him. The red-haired old man was panting heavily as he stared at Di Tian. After a long time, the red-haired old man finally laughed uproariously. Good, good. To think that you would be able to defeat all of us in such a short period of time. Go on, let's see what's waiting for you." Di Tian's countenance gleamed with sharpness. Although Qin Wenyan had broken through, Di Tian hadn't condensed his constellation yet. His cultivation base was still at the peak of Heavenly Dipper, but Qin Wentian's insights were also his insights. Although he didn't condense his Dreamworld constellation, just the fusion of true intents was already extremely powerful. In addition to his illusory demonic energy, fiend transformation art, bloodline protection, and fiend god heavenly suppression art, he could finally defeat these immortals who had their cultivation bases suppressed. Many thanks for Senior's guidance during these days. If I can obtain the inheritance of the Immortal Palace, I will definitely grant all of you your freedom. Di Tian bowed. Go on. The red-haired old man waved his hands. Di Tian nodded and his silhouette flickered as he flew forward. Everywhere he passed by, there were many immortals who had their cultivation bases suppressed. All of them were smiling at Di Tian. Good fellow, you can do it. You are much stronger compared to this old man back then. A muscular man grinned. The eyes of the dispirited young woman on the lake seemed to have regained some luster. She stared at Di Tian as he silently advanced forward. He has already completed his challenge. Next, she didn't know what would be waiting for him. Di Tian's countenance was like lightning. He continued on his way, traversing a vast distance before he saw a slanted mountain peak in front of him. On that mountain peak, there were two silhouettes. One was sitting while the other was standing. Behind them, there was a simple house. The person sitting on the slanted mountain peak was an old man. His hair was curled up and his robes were tattered. He had a smile on his face as he stared at Di Tian. As for the person standing, it was a cold-looking young man clad in black. His entire body exuded a cold intent, and the eyes he used to stare at Di Tian were sharper than blades, as though they could pierce through Di Tian's soul. What a cold person! Di Tian stared at the cold-looking young man. Among the people he met before, this young man's aura was the coldest, causing people to not dare to get close to him. Come on up. The old man spoke to Di Tian. Di Tian nodded lightly. He slowly walked up, arriving before the old man and the young man. Being able to defeat so many immortals at the peak of Heavenly Dipper, this already proves your immense potential. But if it wasn't for those fellows intentionally going easy on you, you wouldn't have survived until today. The old man narrowed his eyes as he stared at Tion. Tion nodded. He was very clear about this point. Because he didn't defeat the buried immortals from the outside world. Instead, he relied on the key given to him by the Xia Emperor to enter. At that time, his strength was far from what it was now. If those immortals wanted to kill him, it would be as easy as flipping their palms. However, to be able to improve at such a godly speed in such a short period of time, it's truly rare. In that case, from now onwards, you will start to comprehend this art. If you can succeed in comprehending it within a year, I will consider it as you passing the test. At that time, you will become the lord of this immortal palace, and at the same time, you will also obtain an unimaginable inheritance. The old man faintly spoke, after which, he waved his hands as both he and the cold-looking young man vanished from sight. In front of Tion, a boundlessly vast painting appeared. Countless diagrams and diagrams interweaved within the painting, resembling a painting of the great Tao. Tion swept his gaze over the painting. Very swiftly, his eyes felt as though they were about to sink into it. At this moment, a supremely powerful sealing energy gushed forth from the painting, shining brightly as it directly landed on Tion. Bang! Tion explosively retreated. He closed his eyes and couldn't help but groan in pain. When he opened his eyes again, he actually didn't dare to look at the painting. Earlier, when he glanced at the painting, it was as though he saw an unfathomable sealing ability that could seal everything. Not bad. From the air, the voice of the old man drifted over to Tion. I advise you to break through first before you attempt to comprehend it. If not, based on your current strength, I'm afraid you won't be able to endure it. Remember, you only have a year's time. If you fail to comprehend it, I will wipe away all the memories you have after you entered the immortal palace. Tion's body trembled slightly as his eyes gleamed with a dazzling light. At the same time, in the external world in the Grand Xia Empire, Qin Wenyan, who was currently in closed-door seclusion, suddenly opened his eyes. He inclined his head and stared at the starry skies as his eyes gleamed with sharpness. Sealing a supreme existence. He sealed the immortals in the tomb, sealed the cultivation bases of the immortals, and even sealed the entire immortal palace. To that supreme existence, everything can be sealed. Qin Wenyan mumbled. He could faintly sense that the lord of this immortal palace was definitely an extremely powerful existence and was proficient in sealing. Once he inherited the legacy of the lord of this immortal palace, not only would he be able to undo the seals on the immortals, he would also be able to obtain that terrifying sealing inheritance. Tion's fifth astral soul must definitely be a sealing-type astral soul. What about my fifth astral soul? Qin Wenyan inclined his head and stared at the skies. After which, he closed his eyes again as his perception extended towards the 9 astral rivers in the 9 heavenly layers. The terrifying power of his perception rose unceasingly, transcending the boundaries of the 9 astral rivers. In the blink of an eye, his perception arrived at the 5th heavenly layer, but it didn't stop there. It continued ascending upwards, reaching the 6th heavenly layer. At this moment, Qin Wenyan's perception was already feeling extremely unbearable. The shadow of Qin Wenyan's perception in the air seemed to be changing shape. After crossing the 6th heavenly layer, I would be able to enter the 7th heavenly layer. This is a huge leap. Qin Wenyan's heart was filled with determination. His perception frenziedly surged upwards, allowing the terrifying pressure to bore down on him. Yet, he still managed to protect his perception. Finally, his perception broke through the resplendent astral river, stepping into the 7th heavenly layer. Over here, there was a completely different scene. Chapter 694. Qin Wenyan's perception floated about in this boundlessly vast starry space. As he stared at the resplendent constellations, terrifying waves rose up in his heart. Many of the constellations here were different from those in the lower 6th heavenly layer. Not only was the aura exuded by these constellations stronger, it was also because of the uniqueness of these constellations. With a single glance, These constellations gave Qin Wendian an intense visual impact. Is that a gigantic tortoise? Qin Wendian stared at a constellation not far away from him. This was a demonic beast-type constellation. It had the shape of a gigantic tortoise, blotting out the skies and blotting out the sun. It was unknown how vast it was. This gigantic tortoise also had the body of a serpent, exuding an incomparably demonic aura. It was as though there was a pair of eyes staring at him. This isn't a gigantic tortoise, it's a Xuanwu beast. Qin Wendian's heart trembled. If he could form an innate connection with this constellation, he would be able to summon a Xuanwu beast, possessing a terrifying defense. An intense piercing pain shot through his body, causing Qin Wendian's heart to clench. The seventh heavenly layer was a huge leap compared to the sixth heavenly layer. The astral souls condensed from the astral souls would no longer be golden in color, but the pressure here was also extremely strong. Although his perception could allow him to step into the seventh heavenly layer, he couldn't stay here for too long. He had to find the constellation he wanted to form an innate connection with as soon as possible. His perception sped through the starry space. Qin Wendian saw an extremely powerful constellation. This constellation was like a gigantic mountain that spanned across the sky, resembling an ancient divine mountain. It was unknown how heavy it was, but just by sensing it from afar, Qin Wendian felt as though he was about to be crushed by the weight of the divine mountain. Qin Wendian's heart pounded violently. He had an impulse to send his perception over. However, he still managed to restrain himself. His perception moved through the astral river, staring at the incomparably bizarre constellations. He even saw a terrifying vortex that resembled a black hole. Within that vortex, there seemed to be a pair of eyes that could devour everything. There were no other constellations in the surroundings. It was as though in this domain, no other constellations were allowed to exist. If not, the vortex would devour them all into the vortex. Every single constellation contains a terrifying amount of power within. Qin Wendian's heart trembled, but he still continued his search. He hoped that the astral soul he condensed from the astral soul he condensed this time around would be compatible with the cultivation art he cultivated. Only then would he be able to unleash the full potential of his astral soul and cultivation art. Qin Wendian mainly cultivated two great immortal arts, the Fiend God Suppression art and the Fiend God Body Refinement art. There was no need to doubt the power of these two immortal arts. Their offensive power was extremely terrifying, and the immortal devil body refining art could even create a real immortal devil body. Using one's physical body to fight against immortal devils, how terrifying was that? Astral souls could amplify a stellar martial cultivator's attacks, but ultimately, it was for the sake of a stellar martial cultivator's cultivation. Qin Wendian naturally understood what choice he should make. The pressure on his perception grew stronger and stronger. Qin Wendian was still attempting to ascend upwards. Every time a constellation appeared in his vision, it would be so powerful that it caused Qin Wendian's heart to palpitate. However, he endured it all. His perception was on the verge of collapsing. If he failed this time around, he could only wait for the next chance to ascend to the 9 heavenly layers. However, he still didn't give up. In a place extremely far away from him, a beam of dazzling astral light cascaded downwards. Faintly, a terrifying might permeated the air, causing Qin Wendian's perception to grow even more illusory. However, at this moment, the illusory figure formed from his perception was actually staring in a certain direction. Boundless astral light cascaded down onto the illusory perception. That was a heaven-suppressing silhouette that stood towering in the skies. This constellation actually faintly interweaved into the shape of a human, standing in the air, suppressing the heavens. Every part of its body flickered with a dazzling runic light, as though it was fluttering unceasingly, exuding an extremely terrifying aura. The surroundings of this human-shaped constellation were boundlessly vast, as though it didn't permit the existence of others of the same kind. Just by being there, it would be an existence that could suppress the starry space. Heaven-suppressing Fiend God art, suppression, Fiend God body refinement, supremely strong physique. This constellation should be suitable for me. Qin Wenyin forcibly suppressed the urge to disperse his perception as he drifted towards the constellation. The closer he got, the stronger the suppression energy radiating from the constellation. This continued until Qin Wenyan's perception also sensed a similar aura. At this instant, his perception directly vanished from its original location, traversing a boundless distance, directly landing on the constellation. At this instant, in the 7th heavenly layer of the 9 heavenly layers, numerous beams of astral light traversed a boundless distance, cascading downwards onto the silhouette in the royal palace of Grand Xia. That silhouette trembled violently, but he still maintained his clarity of mind, borrowing the astral light to condense his astral soul. Something major happened in the royal sacred region. This matter was caused by a piece of news. This news soon shocked the entire world, causing a huge commotion in the royal sacred region. This news originated from the hegemon of the royal sacred region, the royal sacred sect. The royal sacred sect announced to the world that Qin Wenyin had repeatedly offended their prestige. Hence, the royal sacred sect decided to issue a kill order, wanting to kill Qin Wenyin. As a character of the royal sacred region, the top ranker of the immortal martial realm, Qin Wenyin, the royal sacred sect actually issued a kill order against him. One could very well imagine how intense the commotion would be. That was the hegemon of the royal sacred region, the royal sacred sect. They actually issued a kill order against a junior of the younger generation? This was simply an unimaginable matter. In these tens of thousands of years, only Qin Wenyin had enjoyed such treatment. Finally, the royal sacred sect still wants to act against Qin Wenyin. Back then when Qin died, Qin Wenyin had already formed a grudge with the royal sacred sect. That fellow is truly arrogant and powerful enough, causing the royal sacred sect to go to war for him. However, if the hegemon of the world wants to kill him, how can Qin Wenyin survive? Many mused in their hearts. Most probably, this era-suppressing genius of the royal sacred region was about to fall. This time around, the royal sacred sect had truly made up their minds. They announced to the world that if there was a young man below 100 years of age who could kill Qin Wenyin, he or she would be able to directly enter the royal sacred sect and become a disciple of the core faction. As for the others who managed to kill Qin Wenyin, they would also be rewarded with a peak-tier celestial phenomenon cultivation art and a high-grade 5th-ranked divine weapon. At the same time, the royal sacred sect also announced the location of Qin Wenyan's current location. Qin Wenyin was currently residing in Grand Xia, the desolate land of the royal sacred region. How could such news not cause shock and frenzy? Naturally, there were also people who speculated. Since the royal sacred sect knew the location of Qin Wenyin, why didn't they directly kill their way over to kill Qin Wenyin but chose to announce this to the world instead? What was the royal sacred sect doing this for? The royal sacred sect's decision to kill Qin Wenyin was a command given by the sacred emperor himself. Now that they knew the medicine sovereign had broken through to the sacred emperor realm, they knew that there was another layer of meaning behind their decision to kill Qin Wenyin. They wanted to see the medicine sovereign's determination when facing the sacred emperor and see if he would still disobey the sacred emperor's order and protect Qin Wenyin. They wanted to tell the world who the hegemon of this region was. They wanted to see the attitude of the medicine sovereign. What would he do? If the medicine sovereign really wanted to protect Qin Wenyin, it was fine as well. The sacred emperor was their backing, and rather than suffering the revenge of the medicine sovereign after killing Qin Wenyin, they would rather choose to see the medicine sovereign's attitude and determination first. By doing so, they could reduce unnecessary losses. A terrifying tempest was currently gushing towards Grand Xia from the royal sacred region. Many experts of the royal sacred region were heading towards Grand Xia, preparing to kill Qin Wenyin. And among these powers heading to Grand Xia, the Grand Shang Empire, the Violet Thunder Sect, and the D Clan were the most active. Undoubtedly, they were the ones who wanted Qin Wenyan's life the most. Those from the Battle Sword Sect were all worried for Qin Wenyin. In fact, when the Emperor of Yi Qingyun, received the order to kill Qin Wenyin, he immediately headed towards Grand Xia. Qin Wenyin of Grand Xia was immersed in his cultivation until one day, he received a letter from the royal sacred region. This letter was written by the chief hall lord of the Star River Association, and the contents of the letter caused Qin Wenyan to feel fear in his heart. He had already guessed that the power of the Star River Association wasn't limited to Grand Xia. However, he didn't expect that the power of the Star River Association didn't only originate from the Royal Sacred Region. Its history was even longer compared to the Royal Sacred Sect. Not only that, it originated from outside the Royal Sacred Region. The Star River Association in the Royal Sacred Region was merely the tip of the iceberg. The content of the letter was to invite him to join the Star River Association. As long as he nodded his head in agreement, the Star River Association would be willing to send him out of the Royal Sacred Region and nurture him in the outside world. If that was the case, they would naturally let bygones be bygones. But if he wasn't willing to accept, he would have to make a public apology and release the restrictions placed on the Star River Association in Grand Xia. However, regardless of which condition it was, Qin Wenyan wasn't willing to accept it. He also replied with a simple sentence: "This matter ends here." He would expel the Star River Association from Grand Xia and forget about this matter. All grudges of the past would be written off with a single stroke. However, Qin Wenyan felt that the other party most probably wouldn't accept it. Not long after the letter was sent out, the Battle Sword Sect sent news to the world. The Royal Sacred Sect had issued a kill order, wanting to kill Qin Wenyan. After which, Yi Qingyun arrived at Grand Xia. In the royal palace, Qin Wenyan and Yi Qingyun were strolling on the stone steps when Yi Qingyun spoke. "Wenyan, it's better for you to leave the Royal Sacred Region." This time around, the Royal Sacred Sect came with such a domineering aura, they're determined to kill you. I can contact the immortal martial realm, and as long as you agree, I can get the envoys to send you out. Qin Wentian's eyes stared straight ahead. He didn't reply immediately. Leaving the Royal Sacred Region was something that would happen sooner or later. He wanted to pursue the strongest cultivation realm and pursue his origins. He had to leave this place no matter what. But was he really going to abandon everything and flee with his tail between his legs? The Royal Sacred Sect has finally issued a kill order for me. Seems like the Sacred Emperor has already agreed to it. Qin Wenyan mumbled. Back then at his wedding in Chu, the experts from the Royal Sacred Sect had all been killed. The Royal Sacred Sect would definitely report this matter to the Royal Sacred Sect. If they wanted to kill him again, they would have to obtain the approval of the Sacred Emperor first. Chapter 695. The Medicine Sovereign had already broken through to the Sacred Emperor realm. In the past, only a few people knew of this news, and the Sacred Emperor of the Royal Sacred Sect was one of them. Now that he informed the upper echelons of the Royal Sacred Sect, those people naturally knew of this as well. However, Yi Qingyun and Qin Wenyan didn't know of this. The experts of the Royal Sacred Region also didn't know of this. There were some among them who wanted to kill Qin Wenyan to obtain the rewards of the Royal Sacred Sect, while those younger than 100 years old wanted to kill Qin Wenyan to become a disciple of the core faction of the Royal Sacred Sect. Qin Wenyan had become a stepping stone in the eyes of many. As long as they could kill him, they would at least be able to obtain bountiful rewards. The experts of Grand Shang, Violet Thunder Sect, and the Dishir clan of the Royal Sacred Region had already arrived in an imposing manner, killing their way to Grand Xia. In fact, they didn't even need the Royal Sacred Sect to act personally. They only needed to watch from the shadows, and with a single command, Qin Wenyan would die for sure. In the Ginkgo Empire of Grand Xia, the blazing sun hung high up in the sky as flowers bloomed within the city. Ever since Qin Wenyan unified Grand Xia, Ginkgo was equivalent to the capital city of Grand Xia. There were many geniuses who came to Ginkgo, wanting to admire the glory of Grand Xia. Outside the majestic imperial palace of Grand Xia, there would be many experts standing there every day. Standing outside the imperial palace, it was as though they could feel the glorious history that Qin Wenyan had created. This period of history would definitely leave a heavy mark on Grand Xia. However, at this moment, the sounds of wind and thunder could be heard drifting over from the horizon. The expressions of everyone were strange as they inclined their heads and stared at the sky. The sunlight was so blinding that their hearts trembled violently. Only to see that in the air, a golden armored warship actually appeared, radiating with a terrifying golden light. On the warship, several experts stood with their hands clasped behind their backs. The sunlight shone down on them, exuding an unexcelled aura, as though they were all supremely powerful existences. Who are they? The hearts of the spectators pounded violently. That golden armored warship hovered in the airspace above Grand Xia, emitting a resplendent golden light that rivaled the blazing sun. Numerous beams of cold light pierced through the air, staring down from the warship, after which, numerous silhouettes could be seen flying over. On the gigantic warship, there were over 100 experts, and each and every one of them exuded a supremely powerful aura. Why have you all come to my Grand Xia Empire? A voice rang out from the great hall of Grand Xia, permeating the air, causing the hearts of the spectators to tremble. Was this the voice of the Emperor of Grand Xia, Qin Wenyan? The warriors on the golden armored warship lined up in a row, seeming to be divided into different camps. They didn't just come from one force, but from many forces. However, they all had the same goal, to kill Qin Wenyan. Qin Wenyan, you should be very clear as to why we are here. Today, Grand Xia shall be the place where your bones will be buried. A cold voice rang out, causing the hearts of the spectators to tremble. These unexcelled experts were all here for the sake of killing the Emperor of Grand Xia, Qin Wenyan. In the royal palace of Grand Xia, numerous figures soared up into the air, standing at the peak of the royal palace. One of them was clad in white, exuding magnificence through the generations. His eyes were filled with coldness as he coldly spoke. I heard the royal sacred sect has given the order. Killing me will allow you to obtain treasures, and there's even a chance to become a core disciple of the royal sacred sect. All of you are willing to be my lackeys, but I wonder if you can take my life. These people came here on the golden armored warship with the sole purpose of taking his life. There was no need for Qin Wenyan to be courteous at all. Someone who's about to die actually dares to spout such arrogant words? An expert from the Violet Thunder sect shone with the power of lightning as he descended from the skies, exuding a sense of imposingness. Everyone, you are all famous characters, yet you all came here in such a grandiose manner just to deal with a junior. I wonder if you all feel shame? Yi Qingyun stood beside Qin Wenyan as he inclined his head and stared at the experts in the air. Yi Qingyun, although you are the human emperor of an ancient country, how can you be compared to my Grand Zhou Empire? My Grand Zhou Empire wants to kill Qin Wenyan, yet you want to interfere? Aren't you afraid that your country will be destroyed? An old man from Grand Zhou Empire had a sharp gaze as he stared at Yi Qingyun. Yi Qingyun's countenance didn't change. His long robes fluttered in the wind as he emotionlessly replied, I, Yi Qingyun, have lived for hundreds of years. What I fear the least is threats. Cultivation has no boundaries. If you threaten the people of your country, I'm afraid your Grand Shang Empire will never have a day of peace. If you kill my royal clan, if I, Yi Qingyun, don't die, I will definitely destroy your Grand Shang Empire. In that case, I will kill you first before I destroy your royal clan. That expert coldly spoke. Is that so? I, Yi Qingyun, will remember this sentence. Yi Qingyun stood arrogantly in the air, exuding the might of the human emperor of an ancient country. Those from Grand Shang, the Violet Thunder sect, the Dishir clan and the Royal Sacred sect should be here as well. Qin Wenyan surveyed the experts in the air as his gaze landed on a young man with an extremely cold expression. This man was extremely famous in the Royal Sacred region. He was none other than one of the era-suppressing geniuses of the past, Qi Lian, a disciple of the Blood Devil Palace and a member of the Qi clan of the Western regions. Qin Wenyan's gaze paused on Qi Lian for an instant as a cold light flickered in his eyes. Beside Qi Lian, there were quite a few young experts. One of them had blood-colored eyes that radiated killing intent. He was none other than Qi Lian's brother, Qi Tai from the Qi clan of the Western regions. He was also a disciple of the Blood Devil Palace and was also a disciple of the Blood Devil Palace. His talent was inferior to Qi Lian, but because Qi Lian was over 20 years of age, his cultivation base was stronger. Right now, he was already at the second level of celestial phenomenon and was still within 100 years of age. Qi Tai stepped out and spoke to everyone. "Everyone, please allow me to fight first." As he spoke, he stared at Qin Wenyan. "My name is Qi Tai and I'm at the celestial phenomenon realm. I really don't understand why the Royal Sacred Sect would make such a big fuss. Qin Wenyan, do you dare to fight me?" Qin Wenyan swept a glance at his opponent, instantly knowing his cultivation base. He still stood at his original location, as though he didn't care about his opponent's existence at all. "Fine, since you want to be a lackey, I will grant you your wish." Qin Wenyan nodded as he stared at him. Behind Qi Tai, his astral soul was released as a resplendent constellation manifested. The terrifying constellation was the color of blood, exuding a towering devil might. Numerous terrifying ancient halberds manifested within the constellation, exuding an incomparably powerful killing intent. Bzz. The constellation flashed past, blotting out the sun. Sunlight couldn't shine down and Qin Wenyan felt as though he was in a space of purgatory. "Kill!" Qi Tai coldly snorted. In an instant, tens of thousands of blood-colored halberds manifested from his constellation as they rained down, stirring up a tempest in the air as rumbling sounds echoed. Blood-colored light circulated around them, containing an unfathomable destructive might. Qin Wenyan lifted his foot and stomped down in the air. A rumbling sound echoed out as a terrifying suppressive might gushed forth, causing the might of the ancient halberds to weaken by several degrees. Golden light flashed as a pair of golden rock wings appeared on Qin Wenyan's back. With a flap of his wings, he resembled a great rock soaring through the skies, moving as fast as lightning. Resplendent astral light shimmered on his golden wings, slicing apart the ancient halberds as though he was a primordial golden-winged great rock. Boom! Devil Qi churned wildly around Qi Tai. With his constellation on his back, he seemed to have transformed into a devil king. Pointing at the incoming Qin Wenyan, he stabbed out with his halberd, refining the void with his blood. Boundless blood-colored halberds slashed out, aiming for Qin Wenyan's golden light. In the center of Qin Wenyan's brows, a pair of demonic eyes blinked. Instantly, Qi Tai only felt the sky changing color. In just an instant, everything seemed to slow down. Qin Wenyan's movements didn't slow down at all. His resplendent wings circulated with a fearsome demonic might, stretching out over 10,000 meters as a resplendent light illuminated the skies, slashing apart the devil halberds and slicing apart Qi Tai's body. The crowd only saw a beam of blood splattering out as the golden rock flickered and returned to his original location. The crowd only saw a bloody wound in the center of Qi Tai's brows, extending downwards as blood gushed out. After which, he fell from the air. How powerful! The energy emanating from those wings is truly terrifying. The spectators all stared at Qin Wenyan. He didn't even release his constellation and was able to kill Qi Tai. This heaven-chosen of the royal sacred region must have already stepped into the celestial phenomenon realm. Qi Tai's countenance was incredibly unsightly to behold. When he first rose to fame, Qin Wenyan was still a nameless character. But now, Qin Wenyan had already broken through to celestial phenomenon, gradually pulling away the distance between them and even killing Qi Tai in such a domineering manner. An era-suppressing heaven-chosen? It was as though he only existed to serve as a foil to Qin Wenyan. Becoming a core disciple of the royal sacred sect by killing me? Qin Wenyan stared at the spectators in the air as his golden wings shimmered with a resplendent light. He then spoke, "You guys are really thinking too much. Just a power like the royal sacred sect, even if you send their core disciples over to kill me, I would still do the same. If it wasn't for the protection of the royal sacred sect back then, Zai Qiu would have already died in my hands, just like Xia Sheng. They should already be considered the most outstanding heavenly dipper sovereigns of the royal sacred sect. How pitiful!" A stifling pressure gushed forth. The eyes of the expert controlling the golden battleship flashed with a towering killing intent as he coldly commanded, "Kill him. Whoever dares to act, Kill without mercy. Yi Qingyun coldly spoke. Don't be a scapegoat. These people who came here today are still insufficient. As the sound of Yi Qingyun's voice faded, the silhouettes of several experts appeared. A terrifying army of celestial phenomenon ascendants soared up into the air, and at the same time, several maidens dressed in the same robes appeared. These were none other than the experts from the Medicine Sovereign Valley. Those who wish to kill Qin Wenyan are enemies with the Medicine Sovereign Valley. Kill them all. One of the maidens from the Medicine Sovereign Valley coldly commanded. The auras of both parties gushed forth, congregating in the air as a chaotic current of energy echoed out, emitting an ear-piercing screech. Are the Medicine Sovereign Valley and Yi Qingyun determined to obstruct our royal sacred sex plans? That expert on the golden battleship coldly spoke. The reason they came here today was merely to probe the strength of the Medicine Sovereign Valley. If the Medicine Sovereign Valley retreated, they would directly kill Qin Wenyan. But from the looks of it now, the attitude of the Medicine Sovereign Valley was extremely unyielding, wanting to protect Qin Wenyan no matter what. What they didn't expect was that the human emperor of Yi Qingyun, actually dared to participate in this matter. How impudent! This was a direct provocation to their position as the hegemon of the royal sacred sect. Chapter 696. Yi Qingyun's gaze turned to the air, staring straight at the expert on the golden-armored warship. Qin Wenyan was his foster son, and the reason why they were connected by fate was because Qin Wenyan and Mo Qingqing had saved his life. If it wasn't for Qin Wenyan and Mo Qingqing's father, he would have already died and the Yi country would have long fallen into the hands of bandits. A man could clearly distinguish between gratitude and grudges. If there was enmity, there would be revenge, and if there was kindness, there would be kindness. In addition, he admired Qin Wenyan very much. This foster son of his would definitely become an outstanding character in the future, a demon-level character that would dominate the entire royal sacred region. His future would definitely be even further away. How could Yi Qingyun allow the royal sacred sect to kill Qin Wenyan? Yi Qingyun, was willing to protect Qin Wenyan, regardless of the price. Hence, a resolute light could be seen in Yi Qingyun's eyes. He then spoke. Yes, if we want to kill Qin Wenyan, even if the royal sacred sect is the hegemon of an entire region, they would have to step over my body first. The experts from the Medicine Sovereign Valley didn't say anything. They continued standing in the air, but the resolute look in their eyes had already given them their answer. Fine. On the golden-armored warship, that expert stared down at the experts below as he coldly spoke. In this world, is there any place that belongs to my royal sacred sect? I really want to see how strong your determination is. As the sound of his voice faded, everyone could feel the sharpness in the voice of the expert on the golden-armored warship. Everything under the heavens belonged to the royal sacred sect? They were simply too arrogant. It was as though everything under the heavens belonged to their royal sacred sect. The royal sacred sect was the hegemon of the royal sacred region, ruling over everything under the heavens. But when the words spoken by the expert from the royal sacred sect sounded so tyrannical that it could swallow mountains and rivers, it caused Qin Wenyan and the others to feel a chill in their hearts. Everything under the heavens belonged to the royal sacred sect. Did this mean that whoever they wanted to die would die? Right now, the royal sacred sect wanted Qin Wenyan to die. They wanted to see how strong the determination of the Medicine Sovereign Valley and Yi Qingyun was. An incomparably intense killing intent flickered in Qin Wenyan's eyes. This sentence of Qin Wenyan caused his impression of the royal sacred sect to worsen to the extreme. The royal sacred sect was the hegemon of the world. They were the strongest. Could they decide the fate of everyone in the world? Everything under the heavens belonged to the royal sacred sect. This sentence exposed the coldness and arrogance of the royal sacred sect. Indeed, the number of people we gathered here today isn't sufficient to kill Qin Wenyan. However, my royal sacred sect wants to see, if we want Qin Wenyan to die, who would dare to obstruct us? On the golden-armored warship, The expert's voice was still as cold as ice. He said, "Qin Wenin, Yi Qingyun, listen up." Yi Qingyun and Qin Wenin inclined their heads, coldly staring at the figure in the air. "Within 7 days, come to the sacred royal city to receive your death. If you don't come, my royal sacred sect dares to make Yi and Grand Xia vanish from the face of the royal sacred region." The expert on the golden armored warship exuded a boundless coldness. This voice of his was so cold that it seeped into Qin Wentian's bones and soul. "Within 7 days, come to the sacred royal city to receive your death. If not, I will make Yi and Grand Xia vanish from the face of the royal sacred region." The words spoken by the royal sacred sect were filled with boundless cold-bloodedness and tyranny. They could indeed accomplish this. As long as the royal sacred sect gave the command, the strongest power in Grand Xia would be easily razed to flat ground. The 9 continents of Grand Xia would be turned into ruins, and Grand Xia would never be able to recover from this setback. In fact, Grand Xia might even be erased from the royal sacred region. This was the first time Qin Wenian truly experienced the coldness and arrogance of a hegemon. Everyone also truly understood the determination of the royal sacred sect to kill Qin Wenian. Back then, Qin Wenian entered the royal sacred sect, killing Xia Sheng and leaving with his life. It wasn't because Qin Wenian was strong, it was because the sacred emperor didn't have the intention to kill Qin Wenian. But this time was different. Everyone in the royal sacred sect wanted Qin Wenian to die. The prestige of a hegemon cannot be blasphemed. Today, a Qin Wenian appeared. If Qin Wenian descended, there would be a second one. Only the fresh blood of Qin Wenian would be engraved in the minds of the people of the royal sacred region. Remember the meaning of the 4 words royal sacred sect. Remember the prestige of a hegemon. No one can ever blaspheme against them. Those who offend them shall die. As the sound of his voice faded, the golden armored warship glowed with resplendent light. The expert had his hands clasped behind his back as he spoke to everyone, "Return." Everyone nodded as they boarded the golden armored warship. Cold gazes swept over to Qin Wenian, staring at Qin Wenian as though they were looking at a dead man. Seems like this time around, they came to the royal sacred sect only to probe the Medicine Sovereign Valley's determination. If they could kill them, they would. But since the Medicine Sovereign Valley wanted to protect Qin Wenian no matter what, the royal sacred sect would also show the Medicine Sovereign Valley their determination. 7 days later, Qin Wenian and Yi Qingyun would go to the royal sacred sect to await their deaths. These words were only meant for Yi Qingyun and Qin Wenian, but wasn't it also meant for the Medicine Sovereign as well? The golden armored warship turned and soared through the air, exuding a tyrannical aura as it left. It left behind an incomparably tyrannical sentence, telling Qin Wenian and the human emperor of Yi to go to the royal sacred sect to await their deaths. In the surroundings of the royal sacred sect, the spectators were all dumbstruck. Qin Wenian seemed to have offended an inconceivably powerful existence, telling Qin Wenian to go to the royal sacred sect to await his death. If not, they would annihilate Grand Xia. The bodies of many trembled as they stared fixedly at Qin Wenian. At this moment, Qin Wenian and the rest were all filled with towering rage as they stared at the departing silhouettes, telling them to go to the royal sacred sect, the hegemon of this world. How awe-inspiring! The royal sacred sect was the hegemon of this world. How awe-inspiring! The sun continued to cascade down from the sky, bringing with it a blazing heat. However, many people felt a chill, including Qin Wenian and Yi Qingyun. It wasn't because of fear, but rather, it was because of the coldness and anger in their hearts. His long robes fluttered in the wind. Qin Wenian didn't speak for a long time. He only stood there, staring at the departing golden armored warship. After a long period of silence, he turned his gaze onto the royal sacred sect below, before casting a glance at the people of Grand Xia. Drawing in a deep breath, there were no more worries in his heart. From today onwards, Fairy Qinmi shall replace me as the ruler of Grand Xia. I shall do this for the sake of reviving Grand Xia. As the sound of Qin Wentian's voice faded, he slowly descended the warship, moving towards the royal sacred sect. An instant later he brought a group of silhouettes and soared through the air, leaving behind the silhouettes of his silhouette that exuded magnificence throughout the generations. Staring at that silhouette, it was filled with an indomitable will, as though he would never return, as well as a stubborn determination to ascend to the peak of Grand Xia. Many years later, there would still be people who wouldn't be able to forget this silhouette. Not long after Qin Wenyan became the emperor of Grand Xia, he brought his lofty ambitions and left the royal sacred sect, saving Grand Xia from calamity. After Qin Wenyan left, numerous silhouettes soared up into the air. These were all the ascendants of Grand Xia, including Fairy Qing, Old Xing, Luo Huan and the rest. They stared at the departing silhouette as tears could be seen in the eyes of many. When would they be able to witness his magnificence again? Chapter 697. The royal sacred region was boundlessly vast, and the sacred royal city was the most flourishing. After Qin Wenyan obtained the top ranker of the immortal martial realm, his fame shook the world on the sacred battle platform, slaying Di Shi and defeating an era-suppressing genius. His potential and combat prowess had proven that he was above all era-suppressing geniuses, and he was faintly the #1 genius among the younger generations in the royal sacred region. He had even killed Xia Sheng in the royal sacred sect, taking revenge for Qin. The medicine sovereign, the immortal martial realm as well as Yi Qingyun protected him, escorting him out of the royal sacred sect safely. But it was precisely this supreme heaven chosen that was now wanted by the royal sacred sect. The hegemon of the world wanted his life. And just a few days ago, news circulated out that Qin Wenyan was coming to the sacred royal city to await his death. Not only for Qin Wenyan, even the human emperor of Yi Qingyun, who was protecting Qin Wenyan, would also be punished by the royal sacred sect. And at this moment, Qin Wenyan had already arrived in the sacred royal city. However, he didn't reveal himself and chose to remain in the most flourishing trading ground in the sacred royal city, silently trading for the Sky Demon Oracle Bone Powder, keeping a low profile. After obtaining the Sky Demon Oracle Bone Powder, he would find a place to cultivate in silence, as though he didn't care about the commotion in the outside world. However, even though Qin Wenyan didn't care, there were others who were anxious. Mo Qingqing was currently gathering the experts from the Medicine Sovereign Valley, preparing to head to the sacred royal city. She didn't expect Qin Wenyan to be so audacious, directly entering the sacred royal city. After all, the royal sacred sect was the hegemon of the world. Now that they had steeled their hearts to kill Qin Wenyan, there would surely be a terrifying storm of commotion. Other than Mo Qingqing, there was one more person who had never left Qin Wenyan's line of sight, even though it had been a very long time since she appeared in front of him. In the sacred royal city, the royal sacred sect stood there, exuding a majestic aura, the hegemon of the world. In the air outside the royal sacred sect, the silhouette of a female could be seen. The eyes of this female flickered with a boundless coldness as killing intent flashed within. "Princess, His Majesty sent another message. We really should go now." Behind Qing'e, the old man had been following her. He wanted to take her away, but Qing'e refused, so there was nothing he could do. After His Majesty ascended to the throne, he had always felt guilty towards the princess and doted on her. He even went to the extent of obtaining the great Nirvana immortal art for one of her requests. Such boldness and determination made his heart tremble. If he were to forcefully take Qing'e away, he wouldn't dare to do so. If he angered the princess, and she was unhappy in the future, then the result would be. And so, as a great general of the immortal nation, he could only run errands for the princess. Furthermore, he couldn't afford to make her unhappy. How pitiful! "Can you help me destroy the royal sacred sect?" Qing'e spoke in a cold voice. The countenance of the old man didn't fluctuate at all. It was as though destroying the royal sacred sect was as easy as lifting a finger. A mere hegemon of a world region, in his eyes, didn't amount to anything at all. Most probably, the amount of time he had lived was even longer compared to the history of the royal sacred sect. "Princess, what can you do after destroying the royal sacred sect?" the old man asked. On the path of pursuing the path of absolute experts, he would definitely encounter many powerful opponents. If he can't surpass them, he can only stagnate at a certain level or die. Even if I help him to destroy the royal sacred sect, there would still be another one. Don't tell me Princess wants to protect him forever? The old man was helpless. If he destroyed the royal sacred sect, would the princess leave with him? Seeing how much the princess cared for that young man, she most probably wouldn't be willing to leave. Do you have any good ideas? Qing'er's voice rang out. Her cold eyes stared at the old man as a hint of hope could be seen flickering in her eyes. The old man sighed in his heart when he saw the look in Qing'er's eyes. Seems like Princess Qing'er's love was too deep, there was no cure for it. However, Princess Qing'er had a request for him. If he could help Princess Qing'er settle this matter, Princess Qing'er would definitely remember him, right? Unless he has the protection of an expert. It would be best if a supreme existence accepted him as a disciple and brought him out of the royal sacred region. If that's the case, he would have an easier time, and in the future, he would still have the chance to meet with Princess again. The old man slowly spoke, his words causing a bright light to flash in Qing'er's eyes. But I don't know any supreme existences. Qing'er frowned, feeling somewhat vexed. She hoped that if there was someone who accepted Qin Wenyan as a disciple, it would be best if it was one of those supreme existences. This way, Qin Wenyan's future would be smoother and there would be no need for her to protect him. The eyes of the old man flickered. If Princess requests it, this old slave is willing to pass on your words. His Majesty does have many good friends, but this old slave would like to remind you that supreme existences on the same level as His Majesty wouldn't casually accept disciples. Even if it was for the sake of His Majesty's face, it would only be a decoration and wouldn't protect the disciple. Everything still depends on the talent of the disciple. His talent would definitely not be a problem. Qing'er's eyes brightened as she stared at the old man. In that case, help me pass on my words. Prince. The old man stared at Qing'er as he called out. Qing'er asked, is there anything else? Princess, if this time around, if His Majesty agrees, Princess has no choice but to leave with this old slave. The old man sincerely stated. Qing'er's beautiful eyes froze for a moment before she turned her gaze to the horizons. There was a hint of reluctance in her eyes as a rare smile appeared on her face. All right then. Staring at the back view of Qing'er, the old man shook his head and sighed. He really didn't know what the princess was thinking. She had already witnessed his grand wedding, yet she was still so stubborn. Even if the princess didn't mind, could it be that His Majesty would allow his beloved daughter to share a man with others? No matter how outstanding that young man was, His Majesty wouldn't allow the princess to suffer such grievances, right? What an ill-fated relationship. The old man could only sigh silently. Back then, His Majesty must have made a mistake by sending the princess to such a remote region. The hegemon of the royal sacred region, the royal sacred sect, was still standing there. They were incomparably arrogant, and not long ago, they once said that everything under the heavens belonged to them. Never in their wildest dreams would they have imagined that not long ago, the beauty who once threatened them would almost cause their entire sect to be annihilated with a single thought. If it wasn't for the fact that the old man thought of another method, or if it wasn't for the fact that Qing'er didn't agree, the royal sacred sect would have already been erased from the royal sacred region. However, the royal sacred sect naturally wouldn't know of this matter. They were still waiting for Qin Wenyan to come to the sacred royal city to receive his death. Qin Wenyan naturally didn't know about this. That Snow Lotus maiden had always been someone who didn't like to speak. But even so, she was still the same as before, silently protecting Qin Wenyan from the shadows. Once, for the sake of obtaining the great nirvana immortal art for Qin Wenyan, she caused a huge commotion in the outside world. Once, she personally came to the royal sacred sect and threatened the hegemon of an era. Now, she was still silently worrying for him, protecting him. But all of these, Qin Wenyan had no way of knowing. At this moment, he was sitting cross-legged in an inn and cultivating. Dazzling runes of light flowed around his body. The runes of light flowed on the surface of his body and emitted a mysterious aura, as if they could condense into special runes. Stretching his palms towards the ground, crackling sounds rang out as the powder of the Sky Demon Oracle Bone was absorbed into his body. After which, it flowed through his arterial pathways into his body, completing the tempering process. After which, it transformed into runic lights that circulated around his body, repeating the process over and over again, causing his body to grow stronger and stronger. Even the flowing runic inscriptions gave off a sense of power. After a long time, he drew in a deep breath as the light circulating around his body faded away. He opened his eyes and stared at the Sky Demon Oracle Bone powder that had been cleanly absorbed by him. Right now, the amount of Sky Demon Oracle Bone powder I can collect is simply too little. Also, if I want to condense my Fiend God physique, I would need the help of a true Sky Demon Oracle Bone. I'm afraid I won't be able to find one in the Royal Sacred Region. Qin Wendian silently mused. The transaction ground in the Sacred Royal City was already the strongest in the Royal Sacred Region, yet he still couldn't find a Sky Demon Oracle Bone. Most probably, it would be extremely difficult to find one in the entire Royal Sacred Region. After pondering for a moment, Qin Wendian felt somewhat sullen. So what if he had talent? Without strength, he would still be a plaything in the hands of others. Although he could jump levels and kill third-level ascendants now, his foundation was still too shallow. His cultivation base wasn't high enough, and in front of a hegemon like the Royal Sacred Sect, he was still extremely weak. At this moment, Qin Wendian's eyes flashed with sharpness. With a wave of his hands, a boundless amount of Yuan meteor stones piled up beside Qin Wendian. These were all the Yuan meteor stones Qin Wendian had, all of them were gathered here. Father, the you back then could cause immortals and devils to cry. But now, your child is actually feeling so sullen because of a mere Royal Sacred Sect. I've truly weakened your prestige. With an intention of his will, Qin Wendian caused the Yuan meteor stones to float in the air, floating in different directions as they transformed into an incomparably gigantic divine inscription diagram. Let me take a look at the memories you left behind. Qin Wendian slammed his palms together, and instantly, the entire diagram lit up, transforming into boundless astral light that enveloped his body. That incomparably resplendent astral light frenziedly drilled into Qin Wendian's body. The rate at which the Yuan meteor stones were being consumed had reached an unheard-of level. Qin Wendian closed his eyes and guarded his consciousness, allowing the astral energy to rush into the tiny astral being in his sea of consciousness. Instantly, the tiny astral being shone with the resplendent light. The terrifying astral light directly brought Qin Wendian's consciousness into that boundlessly vast space, unceasingly entering the depths of the starry skies, searching for the memories his father left behind for him. The astral light shone resplendently. Qin Wendian's perception broke through unceasingly, frenziedly rushing towards an astral crystal. That should also be the core memories his father left behind for him. The amount of Yuan meteor stones in the external world was being depleted at an alarming rate. That astral crystal grew brighter and brighter, and finally, with a burst of intense light, Qin Wendian's perception was instantly dragged into another dimension. In this dimension, there was an imposing figure standing in the air. His mouth was currently chanting a series of complicated incantations, and every syllable of the incantation transformed into a terrifying runic light. That imposing figure shone with boundless immortal light, as though it was from the supreme primordial era, illuminating the entire space. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.